Hello everybody, Aaron the Nintintrovert here, and Happy New Year. I'm recording this on December 31st, and the plan is I'm probably going to schedule this video to go up like right at the stroke of midnight, so it'll be like literally 12 a.m. on New Year's Day is when this video is going to be visible to everybody. Hope everybody has a great 2025, by the way. I hope you had a good 2024, but if you didn't, I hope things turn around for you next year. I think there's a lot of exciting things happening next year. And I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, with all that said, this video we are going to go through, and I've compiled a list here on my phone of what we'll say is my top 15 favorite games that released in this year. We're going to go through them in order from least to highest, and yeah, this pretty much for the most part, with a few exceptions here and there, covers just about every game that I played and beat that released this year. There's a couple games I left off for one reason or another, but more or less, this is kind of the gist of everything that I played that came out this year. I did play other games this year that didn't release this year, but we're not talking about those. This is a best of 2024 list. Real quick, just to touch base on a couple things. So this channel is called the Nintintrovert for a reason. I primarily play Nintendo games, so if you're more of a Sony or Xbox fanboy, then you're welcome to the channel. I'm glad to have you here, but there's probably not going to be a lot of that. Now, there might be some exceptions. I do have one PlayStation game on here. You can probably take a wild guess what it is, but most of the games I play are either Nintendo or they're in a similar caliber to Nintendo sort of family-friendly games that they make. I don't really play a lot of like gritty, mature games necessarily, so don't expect to really see that on this list. But yeah, another thing too, hopefully everything sounds good and looks somewhat reasonably okay. Typically I've got a headset on, but I'm recording with this, I got this mic in front of me that I bought a few years ago, actually. I think it might have been in like 2020, it was during the pandemic, but I just never really got around to using it until now, because I've only just now actually started doing content creation. But hopefully, if anything, this will sound better than my headset, but video wise, this is the same like webcam that I'm using when I record gameplay footage, like where I've got my face in the corner on the channel. And for that, where it shrunk down so much, I don't know if it's a big deal because you're mostly just seeing the gameplay, but when I blow it up, it does look pretty grainy, so I might have to rethink something there. I think it's supposed to be, or at least I thought when I bought it, it was a pretty nice like high-end like 4K webcam that I've got hooked into my laptop here. I think it costs like maybe a couple $100, which maybe, it sounds like a lot, but maybe that's not actually that much for a good, camera. Maybe I need to invest more. Sounds like it's starting to rain. That's great. Hopefully that won't pick up on the camera. But the problem could just be the lighting, to be honest. I don't have the greatest setup in here. I've got, 3 overhead lights. I don't have like all these, spotlights set up on a tripod or whatever with a big green screen behind me, so maybe that's part of why the footage looks so hazy. But yeah, I do apologize for that, and hopefully in the future we can do something a little bit better. But let's get right into it. So 2024 I thought was a pretty solid year for Nintendo overall, and just kind of the gaming landscape as a whole. Well, not really. PlayStation and Xbox didn't really have a whole lot, which that's not my target demographic anyway. But in terms of the Nintendo games, and then also the third-party games that I play from companies like, Sega and Namco and stuff like that, I feel like they delivered pretty good this year. So that's ultimately what I care about. So despite this being probably the Switch's last full year on the market all to itself before the Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever comes along, I don't really feel like I've noticed, at least for me personally, like a huge drought in games where I'm just like starving for Switch 2 news. It's definitely not like going from the Wii U days to Switch, when we were all begging to hear more about the codename NX, which ended up being the Switch. So I've kind of been following the Switch 2 patents and stuff, but I've been not patents so much as just rumors and leaks and speculation. But I've been pretty content right now. I'm still happy with the Switch in 2024. If the new Switch didn't release in 2025, God forbid, because if it doesn't, people will probably be riding in the streets with picket forts and torches or whatever. But yeah, I'm pretty content with the current Switch. But there's a lot of good games worth going over here. So we'll start with the bottom of the list, Yeah, the rain's really picking up. Apologies. I'll listen back to this and see how bad that sounds on camera, but we're just gonna make it work for right now. So number 15, we're starting with Princess Peach Showtime. That's kind of the bottom of the list. Probably of the ones I put on the list, definitely the weakest game I played this year. It's not to say it's a bad game. It had some interesting ideas. But Princess Peach Showtime, it's Princess Peach's first game since Super Princess Peach, which came out on the DS back in, I want to say, 2005, something like that. I have very fond memories of that game, and I think it's underrated, by the way. There's a lot of people that don't like Super Princess Peach. I've always kind of wanted to get a sequel to that game. People call that game sexist because where you, the whole gimmick of that game is that you can basically manipulate Peach's emotions, and she can start, crying, and her tears can water plants, or you can make her angry and she catches on fire and can burn stuff, and you can make her giddy and she starts flying. So as a kid I never made that association, as that it was a stereotype about women being emotional or whatever. But I can see why people would think that. I think Nintendo had innocent intentions. I don't really think they were deliberately trying to make that. And I would like to see another company, honestly, like an indie company, bring back that idea. Because I think being able to change a character's emotions and that giving them different sort of elemental abilities is a really cool concept, and being able to solve puzzles in the environment. So I want to see another company do something with that. And they can make it a male protagonist. I don't care. Make it a guy that cries a lot and gets angry. Because again, I don't really see it as a sex thing necessarily. I just think it's a fun concept. So somebody bring it back, if not Nintendo. So that said, we're not talking about Super Princess Peach. We're talking about Princess Peach Showtime. And this game has kind of an interesting gimmick because every level is sort of an act, I guess you could say, of a stage play. Really, I'm only just now making this connection, but I think because you have different costumes, you get Sword Fighter Peach, you get Chef Peach, I'm going to call it Patissier Peach, however you say it. I've never heard that word before. I guess it's a pastry chef, basically. You got Mermaid Peach, you got essentially Superhero Peach, Dashing Thief Peach or something like that, Detective Peach, and each one has kind of a different gameplay style. But the connection that I never made until I started recording this is I think there's 3 levels for each of those, and aren't plays traditionally 3-act plays, so I guess that's maybe why there's 3 for each. So that's kind of neat. I never put that together. The game's okay. Honestly, I don't love it. It doesn't really do anything that I haven't already seen other games do time and time again. It feels in some ways like the most stereotypical by the numbers Nintendo game. It ticks all the boxes for when I think of a Nintendo game, but not in a good way necessarily. For example, it goes for a tactile art direction where everything is kind of made out of real world objects, sort of, because it's a stage play, so everything you've got props and stuff, and trees made out, if you look on the back side, the trees and bushes, they're flat 2D things made out of wood. Nintendo's done that time and time again, and I'm kind of just a little tired of it. Or it might not even be so much that I'm tired of it as I don't think it's executed as well here as in, say, Paper Mario or Yoshi's Crafted World or Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. Have these art styles where it's everything's yarn or everything's clay or everything's paper or what have you. This one it doesn't look that great aesthetically. There's also during the cutscenes there'll sometimes be some weird frame rate dips, and the load times are pretty bad. I'm not a big stickler for frame rate, but in a cutscene it's a little weird, with gameplay I'm more forgiving when it comes to gameplay probably than cutscenes, even though you would think if it's gameplay that might impact your enjoyment of your moment to moment fun that you're having. But yeah, some of the level, the Detective Peach levels, kind of slow everything down to a crawl. They're not that fun. You're sleuthing, trying to solve a mystery. It sounds kind of fun on paper, but in practice, it's kind of whatever. I would say this is probably the weakest game made by Goodfeel. Goodfeel's the company who developed this game. They also made a lot of those other games that have tactile art styles. So they did, I think the first game they did for Nintendo was Wario Land, Shake It, which is a pretty solid game that kind of has this 2D hand-drawn cartoon art style. really great visual identity. They did Yoshi's, well, they did do that, but first they did Kirby's Epic Yarn, which is a really good Kirby game. They did Yoshi's Woolly World, which is a really good Yoshi. Some might even say the best Yoshi game. I would probably agree with that. Yoshi's Crafted World, which was not as good, but still pretty good. And then Princess Peach Showtime. And yeah, it's definitely the weakest of their games. It doesn't really bring anything new to the table, and I just feel like it's not a bad game. It's inoffensive, but I played it. I was done with it. I don't have the strongest memories of it. I can't remember any of the music standing out. It was just kind of a little bit of a blip, where it's like it happened. I don't really have a whole lot else to really say about it, to be completely honest with you. So that was Princess Peach Showtime. I'm looking at this list here, actually. Let's see. I guess we'll say 16 games because I meant to add this one on there. I meant to put somewhere on this list, and it's toward the bottom, so we'll just go ahead and get this one out of the way. Maybe even below Peach, because I really hardly played this game at all when it came out. I don't think most people did. But it was... trying to think what the full name of the game even was. It was like the NES type game. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, I believe is what they called it. I played that game like once. It's like $30, which is a little overpriced for what it is. It's basically NES Remix, which was a really fun little eShop game that got a sequel. So there was 2 of them on the Wii U, and they also ported it to 3DS. And that game was a lot of fun. It's like you do these little micro bite-sized challenges. Each one's maybe like, can be beaten in like a minute or less. And you're trying to go for like a high score or set a world record. And I really liked the NES Remix games. Even though I'm not a big score chaser, I'm not really somebody who necessarily likes playing the same thing over and over again, trying to improve my time and stuff. That's just not really for me. But, I still really enjoyed it back on the Wii U because of the remix part of NES Remix. So it was almost like these ROM hacks of these old Nintendo games where like one mission might be get through the first stage of like the arcade Donkey Kong game where typically, you jump over barrels and stuff, but instead you're not playing as Mario, you're not Jumpman, you're the, Link's 8-bit sprite from the original Legend of Zelda, and so Link can't jump. So you're having to try to avoid barrels only by going up the ladders and kind of like staying there in the middle until it passes because you can't jump over it. That's a really cool idea. There might be a mission where, you're playing through Super Mario Brothers 2, but instead of being Mario, you're, Samus, and so you're, like, shooting stuff with her hand cannon, or you're Kirby, and you're, sucking stuff up with Kirby and shooting it out. So it's like, it was a really cool idea, but this new game that came out this year, the NES edition, Nintendo World Championships or whatever, it takes away the remix part of NES Remix, so it's just these micro challenges that aren't remixed in any meaningful way that changes up the gameplay. It's just you're just playing those ROMs of those old games that you can already do anyway on Nintendo Switch Online, but they're not as good, I know back in the day people hoped they would make a Super Nintendo remix, and so I am kind of hopeful the fact that they call this NES edition that maybe they will make sequels maybe every year or something, and we will get a Super Nintendo one and a Nintendo 64 one, etc. But if they do that, they need to bring back the remix part that NES Remix had and not just make it just straight, one-to-one versions of those old games we can already play, but in a worse format where it's just like a, 10-second little micro challenge, because it's not that fun. So, that was kind of a bust. And I think I've heard, I don't even think the game has like proper online leaderboards to see how well you did compared to other people around the world. So at that point, it's like, why even make this game? So yeah, that was also kind of a stinker. That one down there with Princess Peach Showtime at kind of the bottom of the barrel. But let's see, let me pull my list back up. And next up at number 14, I put the Splatoon 3 side order DLC, and this might be a little controversial that I put it so low. If I were to give these games a rating, by the way, Princess Peach Showtime and also the NES game, I'd probably give them both a 7 out of 10. Not great. But then the Splatoon 3 side order DLC, maybe a 7.5 out of 10. Personally, I think they set the bar so high with Splatoon 2's Octo expansion, and I don't think Side Order comes anywhere close to that. So it's kind of a roguelike, and that was immediately kind of a turnoff for me. I'd never played a roguelike before this, but there's kind of a reason for that. It just didn't sound that enticing to me. Kind of like what I just said with NES Remix, I'm not one who likes to play the same thing over and over and over again. So I don't really like the idea of a game where you start off and you're at a disadvantage. You've got, like, you're starting from nothing. And you get stronger over the course of the game. I mean, I like that, like in an RPG or something like Breath of the Wild. You start with 3 hearts and you die in like one hit, and you start with a stick and you got to find better weapons. But so you die a lot early on, and then you get stronger as the game goes on. But when you die in Breath of the Wild, you don't, it's not open your eyes, wake up, and you're back in the Shrine of Resurrection. Like, I don't like that. I don't like having to start over every single time. And so that's where the Splatoon thing doesn't really do it for me personally. That's just me, It had some interesting bits, but I thought it got very repetitive. I thought there could have been more challenges. I don't know why it took so long to come out. I think it got delayed like well over a year, maybe, if memory serves. But yeah, I just feel like there's significantly less content here. Maybe if I went back and kept replaying to get like everything, but so much of it is just kind of recycled content that you're doing again and again, and I just think, roguelike. Maybe there's just something I'm missing, but they just feel a little lazy to me personally. And I hate to say that about a whole genre, because that's probably going to really tick some people off. But it just feels like an easy way to recycle a lot of content, I think there's probably a reason that a lot of indie games do it, and maybe AAA developers are starting to a little bit, but I feel like if you're an indie company, you've got a limited budget, you don't have that many people working on it, so development takes a long time. So I think it's just kind of an easy way to get something out there, and I don't really want to see a whole lot of first party or like big AAA companies embrace that. But that's just me personally. If you love roguelikes, more power to you. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10. The Side Order DLC didn't do a whole lot for me compared to the Octo expansion, which is probably Splatoon's best single player campaign, far and away. I probably did like Side Order better than Splatoon 3's single player, which I thought was pretty lackluster, didn't really do anything new or interesting. So there's that. But moving on, number 13, I've got Mario and Luigi Brothers Ship, and this one's kind of a shame because I wanted to like this game so bad. And I played the first couple hours of it on the channel. You can go watch that if you haven't seen it already. And I was really into the game early on. Like, first couple hours I was playing it, I was vibing with it. Like, yeah, it's pretty slow paced. Like, I didn't even get my, hammer ability, which you get very early in most other Mario and Luigi games. But I was still having a good time. I was vibing with it. But, after the camera stopped rolling and I was playing it on my own, I was still having a good time. But after about maybe 10 hours or something, I just really started to feel the weight of how much it was dragging on, because it takes forever to get your hammer, and then even once you get that, maybe 5 hours in, it takes forever to get your first bros attack. The bros moves are kind of a staple of Mario and Luigi games, and you get them a lot early on. I'm not alone in having these opinions. I think I'm probably in the majority of people who were pretty underwhelmed with this game. It's interesting because it's hard to even say that this game was divisive. I think most people would agree that it kind of missed the mark, and that's a shame. I hope it doesn't discourage Nintendo from doing another Mario and Luigi game in the future. I'm happy this game exists, though. Unlike Princess Peach Showtime, where I'm kind of apathetic to that game's existence, if anything, I'm a little bit salty that, they could have made a new Wario Land. We've been waiting forever for a new Wario Land. That would have been better than a new Peach game. But this game, I'm happy that Mario and Luigi still exist, and that's like one of the highlights of this year for me. Between this and last year, just the back-to-back, like every Nintendo Direct, we got Super Mario RPG being remade. And then the next Direct after that, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. The Direct after that, Mario and Luigi. So it's just, we're 3 for 3 on Nintendo Directs getting Mario RPGs. I don't think we're going to get any more for a while after this. But that's been a banger year. So even if this game didn't turn out amazing, I'm just happy that it exists, and I hope that Nintendo will keep doing it, even though I think they got a different company to make it. I think it was made by a company called Acquire, which might be why the game didn't quite live up. And, I think Sony maybe was trying to acquire them, ironically enough. So if that happens, then I don't know what that means for Mario and Luigi in the future, but I don't want this series to be dead. I wish Nintendo could have bought out Alpha Dream and saved them from going under, because I think we could have had a better game if all the original talent from Alpha Dream was still on it. They got some of the people, but not everybody. They even got a different composer, and I do like the music, genuinely. I think it's good music in Mario and Luigi Brothers Ship, but it ain't on quite the same level as Yoko Shimomura. Her music, she's a female composer, and she's Japanese. She's, I think, the best in the industry, like bar none. I like her music better than Koji Kondo or David Wise of Donkey Kong Country fame. They're like my number 2 and 3. I'd say David Wise is probably my number 2 composer. Koji Kondo probably number 3. But Yoko Shimomura, she is far and away my favorite. I love her music. It gets a strong emotional reaction out of me. So yeah, it was kind of disappointing that they didn't get her back for this one. I don't know why they didn't. But I still appreciate this game. I think it had a lot of heart and a lot of spirit. But, the combat was really good. It does get kind of repetitive because there's not as many bros moves as there could have been, so you're doing a lot of the same attacks. But the game's just way too bloated. I think most people would agree. You could easily cut out 20, maybe even 30 hours of content. Like, I think Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, which is the first one, is still the best Mario & Luigi game. The story, they tried to go back. This is the first Mario RPG in probably like 10 years or something that actually has unique original characters and a story. So I'm so happy that the Mario mandates are gone and we can actually have that again, because for the longest time it was like Mario RPGs had to be so vanilla and sanitized, and we can't have a plot because people who play Mario games are too stupid and dumb to read, I guess. We can't have any original characters. It's just got to be just very generic, a million Toad NPCs, and that's the only characters. So I'm happy, this game, I appreciate it, even if I don't love it, because the story's kind of lackluster and the characters not very interesting. It picks up in like the last 5 hours of the game. The stakes ramp up, and I won't go into spoilers, but I really like what they did there. I really like the final boss. But it's just a shame that so much of the game, more than half the game, felt like filler. It's like they could have made it way shorter. I love the concept of linking islands together. I think that's awesome, and then they all sort of connect to your hub world in a way. That's really cool. But yeah, the game it missed the mark in a lot of ways, but I appreciate it for trying. So number 12, I have Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And, it's kind of funny. So Mario & Luigi Brothers Ship, just to back up for a little bit, I would give that game maybe an 8 out of 10. Maybe even 7.5. I don't know. That pains me because I love Mario RPG so much, but it is what it is. I love all the animations and stuff in that game. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. This is an interesting one because when I first played it, after I finished it, I thought my early impressions was this is a 9 out of 10. This is a solid Zelda game. But when I think back to it, even though I was really invested in it at the time, and unlike Mario RPG, which I would put down and have a hard time picking back up, when I was playing it, I could not put this game down. I binged this game in a matter of days. It was like probably less than a week I completed this game, and I was just so invested in this game. But when I look back on it, I don't look back on it as fondly as some of the games that in the moment I maybe didn't love as much, but when I really sit and think about them, I think I enjoyed more, if that makes sense. But I really loved Echoes of Wisdom because it's the most ambitious 2D Zelda game. You've got this massive area to explore that's like, I forget how many times, I remember reading, I don't know if it was like right before the game came out, there was a thing where it's like the map is like 9 times or like 12 times bigger than the Link's Awakening map or something like that. But it's a very large world to explore, and kind of in Breath of the Wild fashion, pretty early on in the game it opens up and you can pretty well go anywhere. You can kind of, the game by design deliberately lets you clip into places that feels naughty, like you're going out of bounds, like you're not supposed to be able to go here, like you're breaking the game. And so that's fun. I loved exploring all the different environments. That's what I loved about this game, was the exploration. You had all these NPCs with unique like side quests to do, which really I think is kind of a new thing. Like you'd have characters in like Zelda, the old 2D Zeldas that would be like, hey, could you go do this for me? Could you like bring me a, bee in a jar or something? Here's a butterfly net. Go get me some bugs. But they were very few and far between, but this game is just filled with NPCs with side quests, and there's a log just like Breath of the Wild that shows you all your different side quests to do. So I love the quests. I love exploring, finding stamps. It was just it was a really engrossing experience. I liked the characters a lot more than the characters in Mario and Luigi Brothers Ship. I love seeing all the different races interact with each other, because you've got, it's not often you get a 2D Zelda game that has, the Gerudo in it, and it's got the Deku Scrubs. I don't know if they've ever been in a 2D Zelda. Maybe they have. To my knowledge, I don't know. It maybe it'd have to be like Four Swords Adventures or something. I've never really played that game. But yeah, and then you've got the Zora. You've got two different races of Zora. There's the River Zora and there's the Ocean Zora, and I think that's so cool. They bring in the two, because Zora's kind of got a massive redesign, and I like how they kind of sort of you could say retcon that, but in a way that makes sense, where it's kind of no, we didn't redesign the Zoras. These are two different species that coexist. So I thought that was a really cool way of handling that. And this might be a little bit spoilery, but I really appreciated the lore and the story in this Zelda game, because a lot of times Zelda games feel very kind of nonsensical with the overarching story, and I don't know what's what. Who created everything? Was it the goddess Hylia, or was it the three goddesses? You got Din and Furore and whatever the third one's name is. I'm blanking right now. Din, Furore, Lanayru, I think. But this game brings those goddesses into it. I don't think we've really heard about them much since Ocarina of Time, maybe a little bit, but they go more into the origin of the world story, like Ocarina of Time does, but they go deeper into it, and you learn about this evil force and stuff that they were trying to imprison. I probably should be careful about spoiling too much, but the game has a lot of Ocarina of Time callbacks that I really appreciate. It makes the game feel kind of nostalgic in a way, even though it's a brand new Zelda game. So I really, really liked that. What I didn't like, though, the one thing I don't like about this game, which kind of brings the whole thing down, and it's a major downer because it's a big core element of the gameplay, and that's the titular echoes themselves. I don't like that kind of hands-off gameplay. I've never been the biggest fan, really, of monster wrangling games, even when they're turn-based RPGs like, Pokemon or, I played the new Dragon Quest Monsters that came out last year. I thought that was pretty good. But typically, I don't like games like that because it feels so hands-off. It's especially in this game, I want to be fighting. I want to have my sword and shield and my bow and arrow and bombs, and they kind of give you that a little bit in small doses, but it's just not enough for me. It's not fun. It's not engaging when I'm fighting this big, cool-looking boss. There's Ganon, and go my minion. I'll sit back and watch while you beat up Ganon for me. That's not fun, and they've got some really cool bosses in this game. I like their designs. That's kind of a callback to older Zelda games, some of the bosses. I like the enemy variety. There's a bajillion different enemies. Fixes kind of a big problem I had with not Ocarina of Time, but Breath of the Wild, where it felt like you were just fighting the same Moblins and Bokoblins and Lynels again and again and again and again and again and again and again. But this game's got probably I don't even know, well over 50 enemies, I'm sure, that you can copy and, summon and use to solve puzzles. So it's cool. I like using the echoes to solve puzzles. But for combat, no, it just doesn't do it for me. I want to be fighting the enemy myself. I don't want to be sitting by and watching the conflict happen. That's not for me. And their solution to do that, where you have a limited meter, it's not enough for me. The Rift stuff was pretty cool. The story's pretty dark early on. You find out that the Rift is targeting children specifically. That's dark for a Nintendo game. They're not going after, it's specifically going after the kids. That's pretty unsettling. And Zelda's dad gets mind controlled early on in the game. He gets possessed by the darkness, and he commands the guard. They talk about there's rumors that Zelda's going to get put to death. That's pretty serious stuff. That dying kind of happens, but it's they don't really reference that a lot in Nintendo games. But they explicitly say Zelda's dad is going to kill her, and of course it's not actually Zelda's dad. But so I really liked the story in this game. I was pretty invested. The dungeons I thought were a little weak. I like that they actually genuinely brought back traditional themed dungeons this time, unlike Tears of the Kingdom when they said, hey, classic dungeons are back, and they weren't. But I do think they were a little too simple. They were a little too easy, and I don't have a strong memory of any of them. There was like one or two that had a moment that was kind of like, oh, that's kind of a neat mechanic that stands out a little bit. Like, I think maybe there was an ice dungeon where you'd have to, like, change the temperature of the room to, like, freeze and unfreeze water. So that was kind of cool. But most of the rest of them I didn't think had a strong enough identity. Being able to teleport around the dungeon to various checkpoints, that was really nice. And also being able to view on the map. Because even the Link's Awakening remake didn't do this. It was hard to know which staircases and which, like, ladders and stuff led where, because it wasn't properly mapped. But in this game, it kind of has a line drawn that, like, this staircase connects to this one. So traversing the dungeons was much easier. I really appreciated that, and that needs to be a thing moving forward. There's a lot of elements of this game that do need to be a thing moving forward for the Zelda franchise. I think this kind of raises the bar and sets a new foundation in some ways, like Breath of the Wild did. You get a horse. That's cool. You can go around on your horse. But yeah, I just think and the echoes didn't break the game as much as I worried they would, because I felt like, in Breath of the Wild there's so many puzzles where I think I do prefer puzzles that have one solution where you really have to think about it, and then it feels so clever, like, that developers came up with this, but there are some cases where you can kind of cheese it with your abilities, but on the whole that wasn't as much of a problem as I thought it would be. I didn't mind that too much. But yeah, the biggest thing from this game, I just don't like the echoes. I can respect them for trying something different. If they didn't go with the echoes, this probably wouldn't be a game where you play as Zelda. It'd probably be another game where you play as Link. So I appreciate him for trying something new, but I just don't want to see that moving forward. And it's a matter of personal preference. Some people might have loved it, but I just think I feel like I shouldn't say that it, because it's like, I guess, a subjective opinion, but I feel like it's objectively not as good to have hands-off gameplay where you're watching stuff happen. I want to be the one facilitating the combat. So that's my biggest strike against the game. But I spent a lot of time talking about Echoes of Wisdom, so let's move on. Number 11, I have Bakiru. And this is one that when I initially played it, I probably would have said that, I liked Echoes of Wisdom better. But when I sit back and reflect on it, Echoes of Wisdom, when I first played it, I thought maybe a 9, but as I sit on it, it's maybe an 8 out of 10 game, maybe 8.5. This game I would also put right around there, 8, 8.5. Bakiru is a game that's made by Goodfeel, who we talked about, earlier, as the ones who made, Yoshi's Woolly World and Crafted World and Kirby's Epic Yarn and WarioWare, Shake It, and then most recently the Princess Peach Showtime game, which I thought was pretty eh. But this one I think is better than that one anyways. I wouldn't say it's the best Goodfeel game, but it's really solid. This was a game, I think it came out last year in Japan, and people were really hoping for an English localization, and it never happened for the longest time. It felt a little iffy whether or not it actually was going to, but they finally delivered. They finally localized it into English, because this is a game I would have probably eventually imported from Japan, so I'm very glad that they translated it so I can actually understand, the plot and the characters and stuff. Because a big component of the game, you find these collectibles, but each collectible is like a little fun fact, like a trivia fact about Japan, which is really cool. And so I really love that, because it's like, I like going for 100% in games. I'm kind of a completionist. But the fact that it's not just an arbitrary little collectible that gets you closer to having a 100% file, but it's actually something. It teaches you a little something about Japan and all the different prefectures or whatever. Every level in the game takes place in like a different prefecture or like a region in Japan. And I think there's like over 50. There's a ton of levels in this game. And I want that for other countries, whether it's by Goodfeel or some other company, making these games where I would love an American game where it's like every country, like this level is Kentucky. That's where I'm from. Like, and it's like, the mountains and like horses and just stuff that you associate with Kentucky, fried chicken, I don't know. And then there's the Texas level with cowboys and like oil spills, and then there's the California level with like movie stars, and you got the New York I think that would be awesome. So I would love to see more games do what Bakiru does, and just like base the whole game, like every level is a different state within this country. But Bakiru has a very strong charm to it. It's got a strong identity. I really love all the different character designs, the enemy designs. It's just it's a good feeling game. It makes you feel happy when you're playing it. The music's really good. You know, it's just very upbeat, chipper, fun game. But I will say, gameplay wise, I do think it gets a little repetitive. It's kind of a 3D platformer, and 3D platformers are my favorite genre. That's like my bread and butter. But it's not just a 3D platformer. Probably more than anything, it's kind of a beat 'em up game. And so the combat can get very, very repetitive and a little bit boring after a while. And I think the levels are a little too long. Because these levels, again, there's over like 50 levels, and I appreciate the amount of content, because for a platformer, that's a lot of content, like 50 levels, and each one takes you probably, like, they're kind of linear, you know, like Mario 3D World or something where you're kind of going from point A to point B, but they're pretty open-ended with, like, secrets to find. You know, you don't have a fixed camera, you can move it around and look around, so it's somewhat open-ended, but, you know, you're progressing to the end of the level. There is, like, an end goal, you know, so it's not like a full sandbox like, you know, Mario 64 or something. You know, unlike, say, Mario 3D World, where each level can be beaten in like maybe a couple minutes, you know, maybe 5 minutes at most, the levels in this game can take like probably 20 plus minutes, maybe more, maybe 25, 30, depending on the level. And I just think that's a bit much. I think the levels, I appreciate how much content this game has, but I think the levels could have been a little shorter. I think some of them go on for too long, where I'm just kind of like, when are we getting to the end of this? Because again, just the combat gets very repetitive. You know, you kind of get different abilities and stuff, but it feels very button mashy, you know, a little bit like, kind of like Hyrule Warrior, like, you know, one of the Warriors, Dynasty Warriors or whatever. But unlike those, there's kind of some strategy in Dynasty Warriors. It's like you're button mashing, but also you're having to protect your base and make sure it doesn't fall, and sending out units and protect certain characters. So there's a strategy, whereas in this game, you know, there is some exploration, and, you know, there is a little bit of platforming, but more than anything, it's combat, and the enemies, they just kind of feel like a nuisance more than anything, and it's kind of like you're just pressing the button. There's not really a whole lot of strategy. You just hit them and try not to get hit. You know, there's some pretty cool boss fights in this game. There's a lot that I appreciate about this game, but it was maybe just a little bit underwhelming for me. So yeah, I would give this game about an 8.5 out of 10. I think still a solid game. I still really enjoyed it. Next up, my phone keeps going to sleep, and I have to put in my my unlock. Penny's Big Breakaway. This is a game that was made by the creators of Sonic Mania. So this is an indie game. Christian Whitehead, I think is the dude's name, who was kind of like the lead programmer or whatever, director, I guess, on Sonic Mania. They kind of split off from Sega and are kind of doing their own thing with their own company. And this is the first their first full game. I don't think it's perfect, but I think Penny's Big Breakaway is a really good game. I think I liked it maybe just a little bit better than Bakaru. I think I like Bakaru just a little bit better in terms of identity and like the characters and the charm. Penny's Big Breakaway still has a lot of charm too. Not quite as much as Bakaru, but I think the gameplay is better than Bakaru. It's not as tedious or drawn out. There are still moments of tedium though, because I expected to like this game more than I ended up liking it too, but it's still good. It still managed to be number 10 on this list. But yeah, the biggest problem I had with Penny's Big Breakaway is, especially if you're trying to collect everything, if you're going for 100%, there's times where, so first of all, the checkpoints can kind of be few and far between. You know, there can be a long stretch of platforming before you get to a checkpoint, and if you die, then you have to repeat a whole bunch of platforming that you already did. So I don't love that, but what really makes it a problem is sometimes you'll have like little characters that you'll pass that'll have like a little kind of a mini side quest for you to do, which is very interesting to have side quests in a linear 3D platformer that's, I would say, even more linear than Bakaru. There's not a whole lot of like, I think that game does have a fixed camera from what I remember. You can't change the camera in Penny's Big Breakaway, so even more so you're kind of going from point A to point B, but along the way you'll come across these NPCs that'll be like, hey, I've got some flowers, can you deliver these to my wife for me or whatever, and you'll have like a time limit. And it's like, so get there within the time, and you know, don't hit an enemy or don't get in the water or something, because it'll destroy the flowers. But when you fail those challenges, you can't just go back and the NPC will be like, oh, here's more flowers, try again. You have to either redo the whole level or deliberately die, like purposefully kill yourself, and then get another chance to restart. And so if you have to purposefully kill yourself, that sends you way back to the last checkpoint and undoes a lot of your progress. Because there's a thing, too, if you want 100% the game, you got to do a bunch of like tricks and stunts and flips, almost like you're Tony Hawk or something, racking up combos, which is fun. I do enjoy it. The physics feel really, really good in the game. But it sucks kind of having to do those tricks and stuff all over again for a good minute or something, and then it's like, okay, now we can go back and do that challenge again because you lost all those points, and by the time you get to the end of the level, you're not going to have that. So there's like things here and there that kind of they're kind of little things, but you put them together and they kind of add up to hamper the experience more than I would have liked. But on the whole, I still really enjoy Penny's Big Breakaway because it's a 3D platformer, but it's got this unique mechanic where you have this sentient yo-yo that you whip around, and Penny, she can like hop on it and ride it, like she can like kind of like it starts rolling, you know, or she can like suspend it in midair and use it as kind of like a grappling hook and like swing from it like a vine. And there's just all kinds of cool tricks you can do with the yo-yo. It's a very 90s-esque game. It's got kind of like a lot of people have said it has like, I think like a Sega Saturn kind of art style to it, I think, or reminds them of that, or maybe it's Sega Dreamcast. I think it's the Saturn. I didn't grow up with either of those, but one of the two, so forgive me for my ignorance. But yeah, every level's just got very bold, colors, very, kind of like pastel, like very saturated, and it looks really nice. Early on, I didn't know how I would feel about that from the trailers, but actually playing it, I really think the aesthetics are pretty solid. There was one world in particular I want to mention. I don't remember the names of any of these worlds, but it was like a spa with like all these like water jets and stuff. It was like like all the worlds are just have a very distinct identity. Like there's a desert world, but it's not just a desert. It's like an electric desert world. So there's like all this stuff that'll zap you, and like it's just they do a lot of clever stuff here that doesn't feel like the same stuff you've done a billion times over, which is more than I can say for say Princess Peach Showtime, or even some of the games that's higher on this list that we'll get to later. Like my number 2 game is another 3D platformer, but it doesn't do anything that I've not seen a million times over. So one thing I can give for Penny's Big Breakaway is that it's very different, and I can appreciate that. Even if not everything lands, not everything sticks perfectly, this was a solid game. So moving right along, next up we have Sonic X Shadow Generations, which is one of the more recent games that didn't come out maybe like a couple months ago, and I really enjoyed it. I've never been the biggest Sonic fan, so I feel like this game, I may be underselling it a little bit. Part of me felt like maybe I should put this higher because, again, I've already established I don't necessarily like playing levels over and over and over again trying to improve my score, and that's a big thing of Sonic games, right? You're trying to get that S rank, trying to get the fastest time, trying to do it without losing too many rings. If you don't do that stuff like I didn't, then the game is pretty short. I feel like if I never played Sonic Generations back in the day. I always wanted to. I had the 3D I had the 3DS version, but from what I'd always heard that version's not anywhere near as good as the console version because I didn't have an Xbox or a PlayStation, and it only came to it skipped the Wii. The Wii got Sonic Colors, but it didn't get Sonic Generations. So it was weird. I don't know why that was a thing. So I was very excited to play it, but I feel like if I had played it back in the day, I probably would have been pretty disappointed with the length. Again, as somebody who doesn't necessarily want to replay levels and get the A rank, I like going back through and getting collectibles. You've got like the red rings to find. There's like 5 in every level, not like the Xbox Ring of Death, fortunately. So that's enjoyable. I like doing that. That can get a little tedious because it's like you've got all these different branching paths, and so you end up having to replay the level a bunch trying to get the rings too. Because you don't know which route you need to go down, and then once you go one way, if that's not where the collectible is, then you're probably gonna have to restart because unless the checkpoint was before it, it's a whole thing. But yeah, if you're just booking it from beginning to end, you can probably beat Sonic Generations in just like a couple hours. So I wish there was more there. I wish they maybe added a couple levels on the generation side of things. But they did add a whole extra campaign in Shadow Generations, which is new to this version of the game. And they kind of copied Nintendo and did a Bowser's Fury. So when Nintendo ported Super Mario 3D World to the Switch a couple years ago, they added a whole new mode, Bowser's Fury, which is kind of like a more semi-open world thing. And that's kind of what they do here. It's this whole separate campaign that you select from the main menu that's not a part of like the main game. It's its own. It's essentially 2 games in one. and it doubles or even more than doubles the content of the games. You've got all these extra levels, and I do appreciate. Excuse me, I said that about wishing they had added more to the base Sonic Generations game. But in Shadow Generations, they do kind of pick up where Sonic Generations leaves off, in that there's levels themed around all of the mainline Sonic games that came out after that one. So there's a Sonic Forces level. There's a Sonic Frontiers level. Not every game. There's not like a Sonic Superstars level, although that would have been cool. And there's not like a Sonic Forces level, although I know people don't like that game. But I mean, if they had a Sonic 06 level in the original Sonic Generations, then I don't know, why not throw a Sonic Boom level into I did say Sonic Boom, right? That's what I meant to say if I didn't, but a Sonic Boom level in Shadow Generations, I think that could have been kind of fun. But as it is, it's really good. I enjoy exploring the little open area. It's kind of like one of the open zones from Sonic Frontiers. I wouldn't say I like that hub world as much as any of the individual open zones in Frontiers, but it was still a good time. I still enjoyed that, exploring around. I never really played Shadow the Hedgehog, but I knew stuff about it, like the whole Maria thing and that she dies or whatever. But I always just thought that was kind of cringe, and just kind of real edgy and weird and why is this a Sonic game? But that might still be my feeling if I played Shadow the Hedgehog. I don't know, but Shadow Generations, the ending genuinely gets you. It's pretty emotional. I didn't expect myself to be invested in Shadow and Maria's story as much as I ended up being. And at the time of recording this, I've not had a chance to see the Sonic 3 movie yet because I just got over being sick. But I'm very curious to see how hard that's going to hit me there, because I know they do kind of, I think, go into the Maria stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, it was a good game where I was invested in the story more than I thought I would be. But it was a fun time. I never quite got the hang of the grapple move, where it's kind of just they copied Splatoon, honestly, where Shadow can kind of merge into this goopy stuff and swim around, and then you can grapple these things and swing from it. I never could get that. I don't know if it was just janky or what, because Sonic games have a tendency to be pretty jank. I do think this game's pretty polished overall, but that one move gave me a lot of problems, and I just couldn't get the hang of it. But, I was watching somebody play through the game the other day, and even though I didn't 100% it, it was giving me an itch to go back and play through it again. So that's, I think, probably a good sign. So maybe eventually I will go back and do all the collectibles, get the S rank on every level. Even though that's not normally my thing, I kind of do want to go back and play it some more. So yeah, we'll put Sonic and Shadow Generations, we'll give it maybe a 9 out of 10. I initially thought maybe an 8.5, but when I sit and think on it, I think I like it better than that. Number 8, this one, this is just my subjective opinion, so this one I feel like if I was being objective, probably deserves to be higher, especially when you hear my number 7. So people are going to probably get mad that I put this game over Prince of Persia. But Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, I put it number 8 because I'm honestly not the biggest fan of Metroidvania games. I tend to get very frustrated and confused, and you're doing a lot of backtracking, and I don't know where to go, and I refuse to look at a guide because I'm stubborn and I want to do it myself, and then eventually I just give up and I never finish it. But this game is an exception. This game's kind of an anomaly in that it's one of the few Metroidvanias that I did finish from start to end. I didn't go for 100%. Like I did Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread was the first Metroidvania I ever completed that I didn't rage quit on, and I got everything in that game. I loved Metroid Dread. This game copies a lot of stuff that Metroid Dread did, and it does it pretty well. I think for the most part it exceeds at that. I still think Metroid Dread is a little bit better, but this is maybe the second best Metroidvania game that I've played. And if you don't know what a Metroidvania is, it's just kind of a big open 2D platformer where everything's kind of a labyrinth. It's kind of like a maze, and it's you'll run into all these dead ends, and it's well, you got to come back later when you get this certain item, and then you get that item, and it's great, now I can go back to this one thing and forge my way forward. But sometimes you forget where that one thing is, and it can just become kind of cumbersome. But I think this game handles it pretty well. It's a beautiful game. This is probably one of the prettiest 2D side-scrolling games I've ever played. You can tell there's some Rayman influence there. I think this is made by the same Ubisoft development studio that made Rayman Legends, which is my favorite 2D platformer ever. And you can kind of see that DNA a little bit in there. And I think Ubisoft has pulled that team and they've got them working on something new for Rayman. So that's got me very excited for Rayman's future. Fingers crossed. I love Rayman. But yeah, it was a solid game. It's very beautiful. There's this one element where you get to this area. You can see it in some of the trailers where it's like time stands still, and it's like a shipwreck, and there's like lightning, and like there's a ship being torn apart, but it's frozen. So it's frozen where you can see the lightning bolt, you can see the hull of the ship bursting, and all these particle effects. It looks really good for a Switch game. I played it on Switch. Very few graphical compromises. I don't feel like I missed out anything by not playing it on like PlayStation or something. But it just looks incredible. That particular area of the game just so good. The story in the game is was a lot more engaging than I thought it would be. I didn't necessarily like the ending. There's certain things. This is kind of, I guess, spoilers a little bit. If you've seen the movie Kipo, the Two Strings, they kind of do that too. Like, I believe in second chances. I believe in redemption. But I think it needs to come from a place of the villain actually having genuine conviction for their actions. I don't like in... was Kipo the name of it? No, Kipo, I think it's something. It was the Two Strings movie. It was something like Kipo. Kipo's something different. That was a DreamWorks animated series that was really good. Kubo, maybe? Kubo, the Two Strings? I'm going to have to Google that real quick. It's like a stop-motion movie, I think. Kind of looks like Paranorman a little bit or something. But it's like Asian-inspired. Yeah, Kubo and the Two Strings is the name of it. I follow the guy who made that game or who made that movie on Twitter. But that was a really good movie, and the story in this game is really good, but I don't like the way either of those end, where the villain's redemption isn't earned. It's, we've turned back the clock. In this game's case, and again, this is kind of a spoiler, we've turned back the clock, and now the villain's a kid again, and we're going to raise him right this time. In Kipo, or in Kubo, it's they've had their memory wiped, they have amnesia, and they're like, who was I? I don't remember. And they're like, oh, you were a great person. You were a really good guy. I believe in second chances, but I believe there needs to be remorse, where you actually learn something and not just like rewind, undo. That's not what a second chance is. It's not realistic, and it's just not a good story device. I don't like when things, because the game, it kind of plays a lot with time travel, but I think time travel can kind of be a Deus Ex Machina. It can kind of solve your problems a little too conveniently, and I don't like that. If somebody dies, they're dead. I don't like, well, let's rewind the clock and just make it that never happened, But that's a relatively minor complaint aside. I never played all the DLC in that game. I probably should. Once I kind of finished, I was kind of done. I felt like I got my fill of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, but it had some really clever puzzles. It had a lot of really, really good ideas. Just different things you can do. From a gameplay perspective, being able to turn back time and make like clones of yourself, that was really cool. It's just story-wise where I think time travel... Okami kind of does that too. And I think like Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, where it's like, no, don't solve problems with time travel. It gets weird and confusing and kind of stupid. But that's just my opinion. But I still thought it was a really solid game overall. Very hard. Some of the combat was pretty tricky, which again is in line with Metroid Dread. But the platforming was way harder than Metroid Dread. I don't know if the bosses were quite as hard, because I remember I got stuck on the final boss in Metroid Dread for a long time. So the bosses were maybe a little easy, although you can adjust the game's difficulty. I was playing on like normal. But the platforming was something else. I think you can make that easier too. You can turn on something that adds extra platforms. It was a fun challenge though, but sometimes maybe a little bit too much for me. I've never been super big into games like Meat Boy or Celeste, or like, I just don't really like super brutal 2D platformer. Like, I like a challenge. I like a hard game, but after a point, it's like, well, this starts to get not that fun if it's way too hard. But overall, I still thought it was a really solid game. I liked the main character. I really connected with him. I'm only just now remembering that. Sargon, I think was his name, or something like that. Because I remember there was that little girl that's like, oh, hi, Sargon. And she was cool. I think you could like buy stuff off her. It's been a bit. That game came out at the start of the year, so I forget a lot. But I think I remember really connected. I like that character was like, that's a good guy. I like his motivations. I like his moral compass. I really resonate with his character. So moving on, number 7 is, and this is where it's going to get kind of controversial, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. This game, people are probably going to want to stone me that I put this ahead of Prince of Persia and some of the other games on this list, because not only is it admittedly, it's kind of a rehashed port. It's not. They didn't really do a whole lot to update it. They improved some things here and there, but it just looks like an upscaled 3DS game. It doesn't look very good. You compare it to Luigi's Mansion 3, which was made natively for Switch, and it's no comparison. Luigi's Mansion 3 looks way better than this game. So and the fact Nintendo charged a full $60 for it's kind of embarrassing. It's hard to justify that. It does kind of feel like a cheap cash grab and kind of a way to pad out the Switch's library before the Switch 2 comes out. So that's kind of a bummer. It should have been like $40 at most if they're not going to do a full ground up remake of it like they did with Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. But on top of that, this game is also kind of considered the black sheep of Luigi's Mansion. A lot of people say this is the worst one. They don't like it. Personally, I really like this game. I think my favorite is probably the first Luigi's Mansion. So again, if I'm being objective, this one would not deserve to be number 7, but it's my subjective opinion, and I can't help it. I enjoy this game more than Prince of Persia. That's just me. So the game does have problems. It does kind of suck how EGAD will stop and you do the missions and then he yanks you out of the level. You can't just freely explore. I think that would be better if the game was made in such a way that you could explore, at your own pace. I think they made it that way probably where it was initially a 3DS game to make it more suitable for a handheld where you're playing in shorter bursts instead of having this big open thing, on a handheld game. So, the progression, the mission structure isn't great. But with that said, I think Luigi's Mansion 2 has the strongest combat of all three of the games. I think they refine the ghost-sucking gameplay a lot from the first game, just make it way more fun, way less frustrating. And some of the enemies are kind of a challenge. Some of the gauntlets where it's like you've got 5 minutes or something to go through and try to, exercise all the ghosts out of all the rooms before time runs out. Are genuinely really fun and engaging and kind of challenging. Like Luigi's Mansion 3, they add that slam mechanic, but it makes the game way too easy. And you fight the same ghosts in Luigi's Mansion 3 over and over again. So that one, I'm sorry, but Luigi's Mansion 3 is my least favorite. It looks nice. It's it's one of the best looking Switch games. Looks like a Xbox One game. But gameplay-wise, I think it's probably the weakest. The exploration's better than Luigi's Mansion 2, but Luigi's Mansion 2 has way better combat. I wish they had... It bugs me that Luigi's Mansion 3 has co-op. A second player can play as Gooigi and pretty much can do everything Luigi can do. And then in the Luigi's Mansion 1 re-release on 3DS, they added a co-op mode. They should have added co-op to this. There's no reason not to. That's the one thing where it's like... That would have really elevated the experience, so that's a bummer. But I do genuinely really like this game, so 9 out of 10. That's my verdict. This game might also have the best puzzles in the series too. I like the ways that it utilizes the poltergust, where you can suck up a balloon and then shift it into blow mode or whatever you call it on a vacuum, and it fills up the balloon and you can float up with it, and just different stuff like that. Being able to pick up, fire, something that's on fire, suck it up, and then carry it over and burn a spider web. The puzzles, I think, are the strongest in the game, too. The exploration's not as great, but the puzzles, the combat, best in the series to date, in my opinion. I think the perfect Luigi's Mansion game would be if they blended the more open-ended nature of the first game, and to an extent the third one, but everything else the second game, I think, did super well. Admittedly, people lament that there's no portrait ghosts and that they kind of sanitized it a little bit. I don't have too big of a problem with that. Some of the bosses aren't super interesting. Miyamoto might have meddled a little too much. I think in the greenhouse level there was going to be a plant boss, a man-eating plant, and Miyamoto was like, no, that's too predictable. We got to do something different. And what they ended up changing it to instead was a possessed staircase, so you're battling stairs. That kind of sucked. But I didn't miss the portrait ghost too much. I think there was still enough personality. I like when you're in the graveyard, I think in maybe the second world, the greenhouse area. you fight these three like ghost sisters, and one of them kind of like flirts at Luigi, kind of like winks and like maybe blows him a kiss or something, and Luigi he's like scared, but he kind of waves back like, hey, like he's like terrified, but he's also a little bit turned on at the same time. So it's got some pretty funny cutscenes. There's one where Luigi sticks his hand in a portal, and it makes his hand appear like on the other side, and he can see it, and so he like makes his hand that's in the portal like wave, and he's like, hello, hey, hello. He's like waving at his own hand from across the room. So it's got some really, really top-notch cutscenes. And real quick, I'm going to grab my my charger because my laptop is about to die here. 1 second. Let's see. Is this going to reach from where I have it plugged in at? I don't know. While I'm doing this, you can look at my amiibo shelf there, count all my amiibos, see which ones you have and which ones you don't have. There we go. Alright, I think we're good now. Let me sit back down here. Let's make sure that it's charging, because we don't want to lose power and lose this whole recording. That would suck. We've been going for an hour now. Yeah, okay, it's plugged in, so we should be good. Let me maybe back up a little bit so I've got more light hitting me again. Apologies that I don't have the greatest lighting. But yeah, that's Luigi's Mansion 2. I really like that game regardless of what other people say about it. So next up on my list, we are on number 6, I believe. And number 6 is Mario vs. Donkey Kong. This is another one that to a lot of people might be a little crazy to have this high. Kind of like Luigi's Mansion, yeah. This was kind of an overpriced game. I think $40 at most. I think $40 would have been the sweet spot. It's not a full $60. They charge $50 for this. And in some ways it justifies it, because they added like 2 whole new worlds to the game. And when you beat the game, every world gets like an extra world. So you could say there's 4 new worlds in this game in a way. They added like a snow level and then like a carnival level. They also added like a 2-player co-op mode, which is really cool. So they added a lot of stuff, and this is a remake from the ground up. It's not just like a port. They actually put a lot of work and effort into it, and it looks really, really good. I think the game looks super good. Very pretty game. And we might play it on the channel before long, because it's a short game. Even with all that added content, it is pretty short. Each level is like you can beat in a couple minutes. So even though there's like 200 levels, like, you know, you can still beat the game in a matter of hours. You can beat it in like a day if you really just, you know, put a lot of time in, play it for like a, 4-hour session, just straight 4 or 5 hours, and then you can 100% the game. But it's still a fun game despite being so short. I appreciate that with a lot of things, with the Mario franchise in particular, that Nintendo is going back to basics, finding what worked, not necessarily thinking they have to reinvent the wheel every single time. Because sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for years, there's more Mario versus Donkey Kong games that are about those minions where you just like kind of swipe on the screen and you guide them along, and they do their thing. And nobody really likes that much. The first one on DS, it was alright, but then they just made another one and another one and another one. It was just the same exact stuff, and there's like 5 of them, and none of those games have anything that makes them stand apart from each other. It's just kind of copy and paste, and it's like, again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But they broke it, and then they didn't fix it, and they did like 5 games of that broken, But they went back to basics with this one by remaking the first one on the GBA, which is the best one. It's also in line with like how Donkey Kong 94 was, I think is the name, or what people call it. It's just called Donkey Kong, but to differentiate it from the arcade game, people call it by the year that it came out. I think it's like Donkey Kong 94, I think. Kind of like how they do Sonic 06, because that game was just called Sonic the Hedgehog. So to make it distinct from, the other one. It's weird. It's a whole thing. I think companies have learned and don't do that as much anymore because it's confusing. It's weird. But DK94 and the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong are really fun puzzle platformers where you're having to get a key to the door, and you've got a time limit, and you're trying. You can go for a high score. You can go back and try to get a like 3-star rank or whatever by beating it fast enough. Again, that's not something that super excites me, but even just playing them through the first time, I was content. I didn't feel like I needed to necessarily go back and do all that. But it was a solid game. I beat it so fast I kind of forgotten a lot about it. But I want to replay it in the next year. I'll probably play through it again on the channel because I just really want to play it again. Every world ends with a fun Donkey Kong boss fight because Donkey Kong is kind of your rival in these games. He's not a good guy, so that's always kind of fun. Again, Nintendo kind of going back to DK's origins and making him a bad guy, and it's breaking from those gosh darn Mario mandates where it's like, no, Donkey Kong, he's a friend now. We can't have a game where like he can't be a friend in this game and then an enemy in this game. We got to be consistent. But like, no, just have fun with it. Don't take yourself so seriously, Nintendo. That's why we fell in love with Mario in the first place, because the games are fun because you had fun when you were making them. Instead of making it this very stale, sanitized thing. So that's that. I really enjoyed that. And then moving on, number 5, I have Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. And this is probably my favorite Monkey Ball game. I played a little bit of the first Monkey Ball game and really enjoyed it. My friend at the time, he had like an emulator that had a bunch of GameCube games on it, and so we played it, me and a couple buddies. And I had a good time with it. But we didn't play a ton of it. But I always wanted to own Monkey Ball for myself and play more of it. So I never really owned Monkey Ball until Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania came out, I think is the name of it, where it's like the essentially a remake of the first 2 games with like some extra content added in there. And it was all right. I wasn't as blown away with it as I thought I would. I was a little bit disappointed. I really thought that I was going to love those first 2 Monkey Ball games, but for one thing, they were too difficult for me to where I thought it was like kind of borderline unfair. Like it felt brutal to the extent where like playing the levels over and over to try to get it right kind of stopped being fun after a point. 'Cause it's like I've died like 100 times and I'm still not getting it. But another problem I had with the game is that a lot of the levels were locked behind this mode that was kind of like I think maybe all the Monkey Ball 2 levels, if I'm remembering correctly. It was like a mode where it's kind of like a gauntlet where it's like you have to beat all of them back to back to back. So it's like you're not just beating them one at a time and then moving on to the next one and you can quit any time and start up at any time. It's like, no, you can't save and quit here. If you quit on level 30 and you come back, you're going to be back on level 1. So I didn't like that, especially again, considering how hard the game is, and you might get stuck on one level for over an hour. And then it's like, I got 20 more of these to do. Or like if I get a game over, I got to start all over. And it's like I want to see all the levels, but you're gatekeeping me from being able to do that. But this Monkey Ball doesn't do that. And the levels, they're challenging. You'll die and you'll want to try to get it again and again, but you don't get overly frustrated. It's not that same brutal level of difficulty. Because I also played, was it Banana Blitz HD on Switch, and then also the 3DS one, which I think might have just been called Super Monkey Ball 3D. And those ones are the polar opposite. They're way too easy. But I think Banana Rumble is the perfect middle ground. And, it doesn't have the jump move that Banana Blitz had, which kind of breaks the game. It makes things way too easy. It kind of takes away from what Monkey Ball is, where it's a ball rolling game, and makes it more of a platformer, which is not really what it was intended to be. But instead, this game has a roll move that kind of feels like Sonic's Spin Dash, or like Pac-Man's Rev Roll in Pac-Man World 2, and 1, 2, and 3. He has that move. And I think it works a lot better. So you're really playing with momentum. There'll be like a slope, and so you want to charge it up. You fill the meter however high you want to, and the further you fill it, the further it sends you launching. But it's a lot of fun. I think the game, I haven't played it for myself, but I think there's even like a co-op and an online co-op, which is really awesome. Be able to hop online and play it with a buddy. That's so cool, and I hope I get the chance to do that someday. I played this game with my nephew, and he got really into it too. He got it. I don't know how much he played it on his own Switch. He's like 6. He'll get like real fixated on one game, and then he'll like kind of not play anything else. But if he ever gets back into it, I'll hopefully me and him, we can maybe play that online together. Do like a new file going through the campaign or something. But I think the co-op would be a lot of fun. A big emphasis in this game too. It's got a lot of kind of battle royale-esque mini games where you're playing with like maybe 20 people online or something. I've not played any of these. I've heard. I think I heard that they weren't very good, but I don't know. I'm not really super interested. I don't really care that much about the multiplayer minigames, but there's still a ton of content single player wise that I don't really care. I've got my fill with this game, and I really enjoyed it. There's still like 200 original Monkey Ball levels to play, ignoring the extra bells and whistles, and I really liked it. It was a really solid game. Easily my favorite Monkey Ball game, and kind of what I hoped Banana Mania would be. So yeah, moving on. We're on to number 4 now. We're getting up there. And for number 4, I put, and some of these are interchangeable. I'm kind of like, well, do I like Monkey Ball better than this? I don't know. And real quick, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Super Monkey Ball, Banana Rumble. All those games I would give 9 out of 10s, because I don't think I said what I would rate them. Prince of Persia Lost Crown, also 9 out of 10. But moving on, number 4, Epic Mickey Rebrushed. I never played Epic Mickey before. I always wanted to, but it was like a Wii exclusive, and like it's kind of cumbersome to like hook up the Wii, and plug in your, got the 3-prong AV cables or whatever, your red, yellow, and white, and a lot of modern TV displays don't even have that, so then you gotta get a AV to HDMI converter, and it's a whole process. You gotta make sure your Wii remotes have batteries. So I never played it, but I always wanted to. I've heard that game didn't quite deliver on some promises, but that I think for this remake they went back and addressed some issues and kind of maybe made this game more like it was supposed to have been back in the day. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't have that frame of reference to compare it to the original. But just as it is on its own, I thought this was a really, really great game. It's a 3D platformer, but with more of an edge to it. It's got kind of a Tim Burton-esque sort of identity, which is unique for a 3D platformer. You've got games like Little Nightmares that are kind of Tim Burton-y, but that's kind of more of a horror stealth game. But yeah, for a 3D platform, I guess Psychonauts is kind of a Tim Burton-y sort of 3D platformer. But it's not something you've seen a whole lot of, and I can really appreciate it, just the aesthetics, how it's got more of an edge to, because it's a Disney game with an edge to it too, that it's, you could see how Disney could have maybe wanted to play it safer and more sanitized with the Mickey franchise like Nintendo did for Mario for a long time, because it's like, this is our mascot, it needs to be this one specific identifiable thing. But no, this game takes a lot of risks, and I think it really succeeds. It's got kind of a whole morality system, which somewhat changes up the game, not in any like super major ways, but if you want to 100% it, you have to kind of play through the game again like a few different times and sort of solve quests in different ways. You can kind of be a good Mickey or a bad Mickey if you want to. It doesn't have a huge effect on the overarching plot, but in the individual missions, it does change the gameplay a little bit. You'll have different outcomes. Some things might be easier, some things might be harder. I think if you play as good Mickey, then I think the game's maybe a little bit easier overall. But if you're bad Mickey, then you're kind of making enemies with more people and turning them against you. You've got less allies, so it's more challenging. So I do like that system. I think visually, the game looks great. Now, I played it on Switch. There are some pretty significant frame rate drops where, like, if you're in combat, maybe for just a second or two, like, it'll just completely drop to, like, 1 frame for, like, a second. And that's never great when that happens. That's kind of a big problem. Hopefully maybe they can fix that on like Switch 2 or whatever, go back and like update that. But I could see that being a deal breaker for some people on Switch, and so I would maybe say if you have a PlayStation or Xbox, buy it there instead. But to me, it didn't ruin the experience. I still had a great time with it. The platforming was really fun. I didn't even talk about the painting mechanic, which is really satisfying, where you've got paint and then you've got thinner, and so you can erase and fill in different things in the environment to solve puzzles and create platforms, and it's really clever, the stuff they do with it. So yeah, hopefully maybe they'll do give Epic Mickey 2 the same treatment and remake it, because I've heard that game is all about like kind of cooperating with Oswald, and if you don't have a second person, Oswald's AI is like atrocious from what I've heard. I'd like to play it for myself. Maybe I will someday, even if it doesn't get a remake, because it is on you can stream it on PS5. It's like a one of those PlayStation 3 games that's like on their PlayStation Premium subscription thing or whatever. So I might play it there even if they don't remake it, but I've heard not very good things about it. So it probably could use a remake. But yeah, Epic Mickey I thought was great. I think Purple Lamp Studios is a very talented team. They're really, really great at remaking games. They did the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. I'm excited to see what they do next. I think they're working on another SpongeBob thing. I didn't love Cosmic Shake that much, which was an original game. I think maybe they're better at remaking, like doing faithful remasters than making their own original things. I don't know. We'll see, because I think they're coming out, it looks like next year. They kind of gave a little teaser trailer for what looks to be a new SpongeBob game, where I guess the Flying Dutchman plays a big role. It looks like Patrick's turned into a ghost, and he still is kind of your companion the same way he was in Cosmic Shake, where he's like a balloon that follows you around. Now I guess he'll follow you as a ghost, so it could be interesting. Hopefully that'll turn out to be pretty good. I'm assuming it's Purple Lamp. It might not be. It could be somebody else working on it. But I think they've got a pretty good track record. I didn't love Cosmic Shake, but there are remakes. SpongeBob, Mickey. It's solid stuff. I hope they do the SpongeBob movie at some point. I'd love to see that come back. But yeah. So moving on, that was number 4. We're down to our top 3. Drum roll. Number 3, we have a game I've played quite a lot of on the channel, Super Mario Party Jamboree. This is a really solid Mario Party entry, and it kind of continues in the footsteps of the other Switch Mario Party games and being a return to form. You had Super Mario Party, which came out in 2018, and it was kind of mixed. They got rid of the stupid car mechanic that was in Mario Party 9 and 10 that everybody unanimously hated, and made it more traditional, where all the players go whatever route they want to on the board and collect stars, trade in 20 coins for a star, all that, play mini games between every round. What we all know and love from Mario Party. But a lot of people felt like Super Mario Party missed the boat. It was very different. Personally, I really enjoyed Super Mario Party, but there are elements of that game that aren't as good as the classics. And then for Mario Party Superstars, they brought back 100 classic mini games, 5 classic boards, and it was kind of a best of collection of just all the best that Mario Party has to offer, and it was a really solid game. I'd always hoped they would give DLC to that game and give it just more boards, more content, but they went a different route. They made a new game entirely in Super Mario Party Jamboree, which has 5 brand new boards and 2 classic ones that were brought back from the Nintendo 64 games, being Western Land and Mario Rainbow Castle, whatever it's called. I forget the name of that one. But I think Mario Party Jamboree, even though it's kind of not what I wanted, because I kind of just wanted DLC to the game that they made, it's still a really solid game. I might like Mario Party Superstars just a little bit better, but Jamboree is really, really good. It's one of the better Mario Parties. It might have the strongest selection of boards in any Mario Party game, which is high praise. Not the strongest minigame selection, though. I think Mario Party Superstars had better minigames than Jamboree. I don't like how so many of the minigames are locked behind different modes, because they boast about how this game has more minigames than any other Mario Party. There's 120 or 130, but a lot of them are just side modes that I'm not really interested in playing. It's kind of just a secondary supplementary thing. So in terms of the main game, you end up getting repetitive mini games a lot, where it feels like you're playing the same ones over and over again, especially if you're playing with a Pro controller, because there's a lot of them that can only be played with Joy-Cons that use motion control. And I think it's cool that they have both in there. But yeah, if you're sticking with the main boards, playing traditional Mario Party, which is what I want to do the majority of the time, probably most people, and not necessarily all the side, the rhythm cooking mini game, and there's the online Koopathlon, and the mode where you're working together, co-op thing with 10 people to take on a giant Bowser, and they're neat modes as kind of a novelty, but not something I really see myself going back to again and again and again. And so it just kind of sucks that so many of the mini games are relegated to that, to where, again, if you're not playing with the Joy-Cons and you're playing with a Pro controller on the boards, you're going to see the same mini games repeat a lot. So that's my biggest fault to the game. I wish there were more mini games in the core Mario Party mode where you're going around on the board. I like the Jamboree Buddy system. They made it a lot more strategic, and where it's not as overpowered as it was, and also just relying on pure dumb luck as it was in Super Mario Party, which is, I think, part of the reason people didn't like that game so much. It kind of added a layer of strategy, but it was also a little bit broken. to where whoever got the ally basically is just guaranteed to win the game, because you could roll so much further than everybody. But they balance it better here. But there's some things I think could be better there, because a lot of times to get the Jamboree Buddy, you have to play this minigame that goes on for like 3 minutes, and it's just too long. Those minigames could be shorter, like the Waluigi pinball one. Playing the pinball for 3 straight minutes and trying to get the high score, it gets boring after a while. They shouldn't be longer than like 60-second minigames. And then if you, after all that time, you get a Jamboree Buddy who sticks around with you for 3 turns and then goes away. But if someone passes you on the board, they steal it from you. So let's say you get to a Jamboree Buddy, you play the minigame, you win after 3 whole minutes, you get the Jamboree Buddy. But then after the minigame, it's not your turn to go first. Someone else who's like 2 spaces behind you rolls, they steal your Jamboree Buddy. So that whole minigame was pointless. So, they could have done a little better there. I also wish you had more options to turn off the Jamboree Buddies if you want to. I like them being there, but sometimes just to play a traditional Mario Party would be kind of nice. And there's other things that I would change too, like if you use the dueling glove item, you should be able to duel somebody for a star, but you can't do that even with the pro rules on. I like that the pro rules are there, but it's a little weird that they changed the turn limit from, instead of 20, it can only be 12 turns. There's some other weird stuff like that. Some more flexibility, like Smash Brothers. Sakurai does a really good job at giving players options to customize things the way they want. Jamboree could use a little bit more of that. And the online matchmaking, you can have some input lag that kind of slows down. But worse than that, you get a lot of disconnects. Like, I've played the game a couple different times on the channel, and in 2 of those videos, like, I won, but it wasn't satisfying because I was playing online with randos. Everybody ended up getting disconnected, and so I was just playing computer players, and that's no fun. I don't want to be stuck playing online in a 2-hour game with all computer players. So Nintendo needs to work on their online infrastructure to where disconnects aren't so frequent, because that's a real big problem, especially since people are paying $20 to $50 a year for that, more if they have the online or if they have the family plan. I do think it's worth it for all the retro games and stuff, the NES, Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, Sega Genesis. That's good stuff. I don't mind paying $50 a year for that. But at the core of it, it's the online needs to work. And, you're not getting really your money's worth out of that, to be completely honest. So hopefully with the Switch 2, they'll work on that. But yeah, Mario Party Jamboree, there's things I don't like about it. It's not my favorite Mario Party, but there is a lot to like about it, and I really enjoy that game. Number 2 on my list. Now things are really getting dicey. Number 2 is Astrobot, and that is the one game on this list that's not a Nintendo Switch game. It's a game that I played on PlayStation. There's one other game I wanted to touch on that I didn't have on this list. We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll do maybe some honorable mentions here. This is already almost an hour and a half, so I want to wrap this up soon. But yeah, Astrobot is a PlayStation exclusive. It's a 3D platformer, and it's a darn solid one. It's a very polished 3D platformer. If I was going to fault the game for anything, I think it doesn't really do enough to stand out from the crowd fully, where it's really refined, really polished. It looks beautiful, but it's got a lot of different mechanics and different levels, but it's not anything we haven't seen before. I've seen like side-by-side comparisons where it's like, this gimmick they pretty much took directly from Mario Sunshine or from Mario Galaxy, or from, there's a mechanic where you can slow down time, and it's like, well, I've kind of seen that already in A Hat in Time, and also, Crash 4, and just a lot of other games. So it doesn't really have very much in there where it's like, this is unique to just this game. Probably the closest thing, and this is maybe my favorite level in the game, it only shows up like once, and then also in the Christmas DLC that just came out. But you get this ability where you can shrink down. You turn to a mouse, you shrink down, and now all of a sudden, like these little tiny flowers that just look like decorations, you shrink down, and now they're platforms, and you can get on them. And so I think that's a really good showcase for the PlayStation 5's graphical capabilities, because it's like you've got this little teeny tiny flower, and they can shrink down and get up close and see that despite it being so small, it's got all these intricate little textures. It's so seamless. It's not like there's like a loading time. You just bam, you're small, and then you're big, and then you're small, and it's such a cool gimmick. I don't think I've ever really seen anything quite like that in any other game before, but it's done wonderfully. And all the other gimmicks that it does kind of copy from, Mario games or from Crash Bandicoot or from whatever else, it still does it really, really well. So it's a very polished game with a lot of variety, a lot of different level themes and environments. You've got your Arabian levels, and you got just a lot of diversity. Like you got your haunted spooky mansion levels. But this is the game I was talking about when I was saying it doesn't do as much original as it could. Gameplay wise, I think this is one of the best games I've played in the year. I love all the nods to classic PlayStation characters. I was concerned that it would get a little corporate feeling and like the game's advertising to me, like it's marketing. But no, you play the game and you find all these hidden references to Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper and Little Big Planet, and you've got these levels that are based on Horizon Zero Dawn, and there's one themed to God of War, and all these different properties, which in a lot of cases is games I've not even played. There's third party stuff too. There's like a with the DLC, there's like a Rayman Astrobot that shows up, and there's Crash Bandicoot and Spyro in the game, and just all these licensed characters. But it doesn't feel like the game is marketing to me so much as it feels like a love letter, like a museum archiving, celebrating these historical games in the way that Smash Brothers feels. And it's awesome. I love all the different costumes you can get. Some that's based on different characters. You can get like a Ratchet and Clank costume, get a Jak and Daxter costume. The game's got a really catchy soundtrack. The game looks gorgeous. I think it's a fantastic graphical showcase for the PlayStation. Just all the particle. There could be like a level with like all these, it's like a ice cream level, and there's like literally hundreds of sprinkles, and you can charge up and let go and do Astro's spin move and send all those sprinkles flying into the camera, dozens of them at a time. And you just know, like, if this was on Switch, like, my Switch would catch on fire, So it really makes me hope, it's probably too late now, because Nintendo's probably already more or less finalized whatever the Switch 2 is going to be. But I think if this game came out a year or two sooner, Nintendo probably would have looked at this and maybe went back to the drawing board a little bit on the hardware and maybe said, maybe we should beef up the hardware of the Switch 2, because, the game, it uses the graphics that the PS5 is capable of in a way that I feel like only Nintendo would. But yeah, Astrobot, this is my number 2 game. It won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. I think it was well deserved. Some people think that other games got gypped because it's maybe not as big or massive, open world, whatever, this big of a story. But at the end of the day, like the former president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, said, video games are meant to be one thing, fun. And Astrobot is a darn fun game. And but at the Game Awards, they went up to accept the award. They're like, we can't call him by name, but you know who we're talking about. And they basically gave a shout out to Nintendo, just for being their inspiration for, all the Mario games that they made, all the platformers that inspired them. And it just feels like such a level. It doesn't feel, even though it doesn't do a whole lot original, it doesn't feel like just a clone, just a rip-off, like they copied and pasted Mario. It really is, I think it's admirable when a company, instead of necessarily trying to do something brand new, they take what works and do it just as well. And that's what Astrobot is. I wouldn't say it's better than Mario, but in a lot of ways, it's just as good. And I think that's special, to really recreate that secret sauce, that magic. And it's like, we didn't use the exact same 7 or 11 herbs and spices as KFC, but darn it, this chicken, it's just as good as Colonel Sanders. Like, I don't know which one I like better, and that's Astrobot, But what I was going to say, yeah, so I think I got a little sidetracked. Penny's Big Breakaway, I think, and probably even Bakaru too, as far as 3D platformers go, they do more stuff original that I haven't seen before that Astrobot doesn't do. But Astrobot is more fun at the end of the day. And it made me feel things that those games didn't necessarily make me feel. At times those games could get a little tedious, could get a little, because I appreciated them for trying different things. Didn't always work. Astrobot doesn't do a whole lot unique that we haven't seen before. Even the hub area, which is really cool, where all of your Astrobots help you out with things that you've rescued. It's very Pikmin-esque in execution. But it doesn't matter, because it takes it knows what works, what other companies have done, and it leans on that and says, let's do that, but just as good as they do. In some cases, maybe even a little better. And I think that's admirable. Like Crash Team Racing, it's a Mario Kart clone. It's still great. I still love it. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, it's a Smash Brothers clone. It's still great. Not every game has to reinvent the wheel, and I think that's okay. But Astrobot, yeah, it's a great game. I hope it continues to get DLC updates, even if they do like a paid DLC, because that's one critique I have, is that I do think Astrobot, for like a $60, was it maybe even $70? I don't know, because most PS5 games are $70. It was a little short. You know, you got maybe like 6 worlds. There could have been some more content at launch, and they've added new stuff to it. They've added a few free time trial levels, and then they added the winter Christmas level. But I think the game could have a little bit more content. So I hope there'll be like some free and or paid DLC updates that add new levels with new ideas and new Astrobots you can collect themed to different characters, because they've got some deep cuts in there. Even the Christmas DLC, they had like Croc and just like a lot of... It makes my heart giddy to see those 3D platformers represented in there. Maybe they can get like a Ty the Tasmanian Tiger one. That'd be cool. Or like, some other niche thing. I don't know. Did they add Gex? Was Gex one in the DLC? I don't know. If not, they should add him. But they might have. Bubsy. I'd love like a little Astro robot dressed up like Bubsy. Oh, and the DualSense controller feels really great. In some cases, like, I feel like it's a little overstimulating, and I'm not like, on the spectrum or anything as far as I know. But I could see, say, if you have autism, why you might want to just turn the vibration all the way down on this game, because it can almost distract me a little bit at times. But it is neat having that tactile feeling. I hope Nintendo improves on the HD Rumble in their next system, because HD Rumble is kind of neat, but the PlayStation DualSense is a whole nother level, and I can really appreciate it. But at times, and like the sounds that comes out, it feels like the water's splashing in your hands when you jump in water, and the way it rumbles and the sound and the where it's got the speakers on there. But sometimes it's a bit much. It makes me kind of just feel a little kind of like, I don't know if anybody else is sensitive to, like, if you lick a popsicle stick and it's just like, it makes you grimace. It's almost like fingers on a chalkboard. Like, it just makes your teeth feel physically... I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but sometimes Astrobot, the haptic feedback, it's nice, but it's a little overstimulating for me sometimes. And I can only imagine if you're, like, on the spectrum or something, that it's really you're gonna want to probably turn that off, because it's probably you're not gonna like that. But, yeah, that brings us to our number one game, and that is Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. If you know me, Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is literally my favorite game of all time. It came out back in the GameCube, on the GameCube in 2004. And Nintendo, we've talked in this video about the Mario mandates, quote unquote, as people have called them. And some people say, like, oh, that's not a real thing. But no, Nintendo, for a while, they just weren't taking certain liberties with the Mario franchise like they used to, and it's a shame. But Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is an RPG. It's a turn-based RPG. It's got really fun combat. I love getting into battles and the way you can strategize them. You can change up your partners and everything. Really, really fun. Probably my favorite combat in any RPG ever. I'm not even the biggest RPG guy, but man, Mario RPGs have some fun combat. But even more than that, what's really the heart and soul of these games is the story and the characters. And this game has my favorite plot of any game ever. I love the story, the way everything pans out, the twists and turns. There's some crazy plot twists. I don't want to spoil it if you've never played this game, but there's stuff that happens in this game, like the final boss, for example. I'll say this, the final boss isn't Bowser. Bowser shows up in this game. He has a very pivotal role, and he's hilarious. He's like the funniest character. He's the comic relief. I love how Bowser's depicted here. But he's not the big bad. The final boss is somebody other than Bowser. And if you don't know, if you've not had it spoiled for you in the 20 years since this game came out, it'll blow your mind. It's like, oh my god, this is in a Mario game? Nintendo actually went there. They did that. Like, this game is heavy. It touches on themes of death and grief. You have this one character who is literally, he's chronically depressed because his wife died years ago and he feels responsible for it. And you have to get him out of that depressive funk and make him feel like life is worth living. Like, that's heavy stuff. What other Mario game has that? But the music is so good. The game's divided into chapters, so there's 8 different chapters, and each chapter is a story within itself. There's an overarching plot that reveals more to you piece by piece as you go along on the adventure. But each individual chapter also has its own plot with its own characters that may or may not come back into play later in the story. But it's all interwoven so well. It's so well written. And it's funny, too. The game's got some really good humor. It'll occasionally break the fourth wall. It's not too self-aware. It doesn't break the fourth wall so much that it stops being funny. But it's just the right amount of humor and seriousness, moments that'll genuinely make you tear up. And just the music and with the remake, it looks more beautiful now than ever before. It looks gorgeous. It looks perfect, just like I would imagine a Thousand Year Door remake to look. It's my favorite game of all time. That said, I don't know for sure if it's the definitive way to play this game. They even add some new content. There's a couple extra things that were planned but got cut during development that aren't like super substantial, but it's nice to have them in there. It's fun for people who played the game originally. They're like, oh, they added that. That's so sick. I don't want to spoil too much. But so there are fun surprises in there. The graphics look great. I don't know if the music is objectively better, but they have the old soundtrack in there. You can switch to the old music if you don't like the new music, which is awesome. But there's some issues where the text doesn't scroll as fast as it did in the old game, which I do encourage you to read all the lines of dialogue and don't skip it. But, even if you're playing the game for the first time, there's times where it feels like the audio or the dialogue, like you're reading it faster than it's appearing on screen, and there's not a way to speed it up like you could in the original game. Also, in the original game, if you accidentally skip too fast through the dialogue, you could rewind it and see what you missed. You can't rewind it in this game. So that's also kind of annoying. The battles feel a little bit slower because there'll be times where there's like an audience that watches you during the battles, and occasionally they'll throw something at you that can either be good, like an item to help you, or it could be something bad, like an audience might throw, like in cartoons you'll see they throw tomatoes. It's kind of like that. Somebody might throw a rock at you or a tin can that'll hurt you, and you have to quickly react. It was kind of a on your feet reflex thing in the original game. Reflex thing, not reflux. That's when I have heartburn. React to dodge when the audience is trying to attack you while you're in this turn-based battle. But in this game, it slows it down and it makes sure that it stops the action and makes sure that you see that this character, it zooms in on them, that they're about to throw something. So it makes it easier, but it also slows down the game. It's like, just let me just press it and then get back into the action. Stop showing me this cutscene to make sure that I see that this audience member is about to attack me. So that's a little bit cumbersome. It doesn't ruin the game or anything. Probably my biggest issue, though, they changed some of the dialogue. Not a ton, but a little bit. And it kind of bugs me. Because they kind of make certain things a little bit more politically correct. Because part of what I think made the game so good is, again, it's a Mario game. And there's still a lot of moments in there, even in the remake, that make you go, what? They put that in a Mario game? But that's what makes it so good. So it bothers me that they did take out some, because I guess they didn't want to appear sexist or whatever else. Like, they take out a joke where Bowser, he sees this poster of Peach and he thinks it's the real Peach. And it's kind of this funny bit where he's talking to the Peach poster. He thinks it's really her, but she's not saying anything. And it's like, well, why isn't she saying anything? And Bowser's kind of like, well, it could be kind of funny to have a silent princess. That could have its perks, and it's kind of, I guess they were worried about offending people of thinking that, they're saying that women are too naggy or whatever. Newsflash, Bowser's a bad guy. He kidnaps Peach on a bi-weekly basis. He's sexist. You don't kidnap women recurringly, let alone once, but repeatedly. Bowser, he's a stalker. We love him. But he's a bad guy. He is sexist. So when it's like, well, no, we can't have a sexist villain. It's like, well, then what's Bowser supposed to be? But I guess they didn't want to offend anybody, so they cut that out. They cut out where there's some bad guys that catcall a female character, Goombella, where they're like, yo, what's up, baby? We play real nice. They're hitting on her in a very overt thing, and it's like, oh, we don't want to have sexual harassment in a Mario game, but they get punished for, again, they're bad guys. they get punished for it. Goombella tells them off. She's like I'd go anywhere with you creeps. Ew. And then she's like, let's beat them up, Mario. So she takes up for herself. She has agency. She fights back. So I just think it's kind of unfortunate when you take that out, because it's like, it's kind of just a reflection of our society of getting a little too politically correct with certain things, because it's like, joke to an extent, not that you should deliberately try to offend people, because I don't think that's okay, but jokes have to have a little bit of edge, a little bit of something to them, that they have to be a little provocative. Otherwise it's probably not going to be that funny if it's not at least a little bit, edgy, with a little bit of a bite to it. And so I kind of hate how they sanitize the script a little bit. Is probably my biggest issue with the game. So if you add those things together, just how they kind of slow down the pace overall. But it does fix things. Like fast travel is a lot quicker. They cut out some of the backtracking people didn't like. I never minded it too bad. They fix things here and there. But I feel like there's almost just as many things they introduce that kind of take away from the original game. There's also a line, like, it's so ridiculous, and I don't think they meant it in any weird way, that they took out, where there's this character that tries to trick you, and it's like, well, I'll give you 1,000,000 coins, and they're like, yes or no, do you believe them? But like, they're obviously trying to trick you. Or it's like, oh, I'll give you this really special power up that makes you really strong, and then finally they'll be like, okay, if you have mercy on me, I'll let you smell the bottoms of my feet. The character says, people pay a lot of money for that, honest. And it's meant to be like a ridiculous, funny thing, I think. But nowadays with like OnlyFans and stuff, and people do pay for feet pics, so they were like, yeah, maybe we should take that one out. But it's the original script. Just leave it in there. Like, I don't know. It's ridiculous and weird, but I still think it's kind of funny, so I hate that they somewhat sanitize the script. Most of it's preserved. Most of the original humor is still there, but it bugs me that people who play this game for the first time, they're still going to have a great experience, but they're going to miss out on a few of those edgier jokes that I think really bump the game up just a little bit more, in my opinion. But it's still a fantastic game. Part of me thinks that maybe I like the original GameCube version better than the remake, but I'm so happy the remake exists, because it points toward a change in Nintendo's mindset. And I think after this, we're going to finally get an original, traditional Mario RPG with a classic battle system, not the stupid disposable inventory sticker crap that Sticker Star had and Color Splash, and not just like the extra sanitized where everything's vanilla and it's just 1,000,000 toads everywhere. But I think we're going to get a new Mario RPG with original NPCs, all these unique characters that we've never seen in a Mario game before, unique races of characters, an original story where Bowser's not the main villain with its own plot. And I'm just so excited for that. And even if it misses the mark and it's not perfect, like Mario and Luigi Brothers ship, it just excites me to think there's a future where we could get another one. And even if it doesn't live up to Thousand Year Door, that Nintendo, they'll make another one. And then another one. Every few years, a new Mario and Luigi, a new Paper Mario. And even if that one doesn't live up, there's still a chance they can make one that does. And that just makes me so excited, because there's not been hope for a long time. But that just makes me so happy. So yeah, when I look back at the year as a whole, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, even though I don't know if it's the definitive version of this game, it's still a great game. I would highly recommend everybody play. It has such a good story. My favorite show of all time is Avatar The Last Airbender, and like all 3 seasons from beginning to end, that show just has an incredible script, and things come back into play that happened in season 1, and like, it just, the way it pans out, and the humor in that show, the heart, the characters that you fall in love with. I feel the exact same way about Paper Mario. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is the video game equivalent to me to Avatar The Last Airbender. So, not that they're really similar in terms of the content of those stories, but if you think Avatar The Last Airbender is a very tightly woven, well pieced together story, then I would strongly suggest giving Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door a shot, because I think you're going to be equally impressed with how great everything plays out in this game, and how they tie everything together and wrap up all the loose ends. And there's even a post game, which most Mario games don't have. You beat the game, the credits roll, it doesn't reload you at the last save right before the final boss. Like, no, you can go talk to NPCs, and they'll congratulate you on saving the world. They'll reference the cataclysmic event that almost killed everybody. Like, the game continues even after you beat it, and there's so much content and side quests that you can do. It's just, there's like optional party members you can recruit. Like, there's so many surprises in this game, just around every corner. It's such a delight, and I really recommend everybody play Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. But that's it. That's my top 15 games of the year. One I meant to add to the list, I talked about the NES thing. We already kind of touched base on that I meant to put on there. That would have been kind of lower on the list. But another one that I thought I put on here but didn't, but would also be kind of lower. I'd give it maybe a 7.5 out of 10. Unfortunately, didn't quite live up to what I was hoping. Visually, it's very charming. It's got a great art direction. It does some unique things with the gameplay. But I meant to put on here the Plucky Squire. That one I did play on PlayStation because it was free on PlayStation Premium. And, I didn't want to have to pay for it. I would have preferred playing it on Switch. But, it looks better on PlayStation and I can play it for free. And I'm trying to cut back on spending so much on games if I don't have to, because I quit my job for this and I'm not making any money off YouTube and probably won't for a while. I'm probably going to have to find some part-time thing at the very least while I wait to hopefully get enough subscribers and views and stuff that I can start earning some revenue on these videos. I'd like to make this a full-time thing. But yeah, so I played it on PlayStation. It looks fantastic, but the game, it's not super long, but even despite it being fairly short, it starts to drag on, and after a point it's kind of like I'm kind of ready to wrap this up. But it looks great. It has some really cool ideas, the way you flip between 3D and 2D, kind of like how you do in Zelda: A Link Between Worlds or Super Mario Odyssey, when you go into like the 2D like retro sections where you merge into like the murals on the wall. It's like that but on steroids, and it does some really clever things, but gameplay wise I don't think it fully lives up to what it could be. It throws a lot of stuff at the wall and not all of it sticks, where you're just like, well, now you're doing a stealth section and now you're doing this and that. The combat never gets super engaging. It's a very easy game. So there's elements where I think it could have been better, but I still liked it. But I'm kind of glad I didn't pay for it on Switch. I don't know if I'll ever get the Switch version, maybe on a steep discount, because I would kind of like to have it on my Switch library, but I also don't know if I see me playing it ever again, really. But it was all right. Nico de Rico, just to kind of a few honorable mentions. That was a game that I got to the final boss, but I didn't actually beat it. That's a game that has a lot of potential, but sadly, I don't know if I can give that game higher than a 6 out of 10, because gameplay wise, the level design is really, really, really super good. It's on par. It feels like a new Donkey Kong game. It feels on par with Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze at times. But what really bogs it down is just a general lack of polish. And I don't know if they ever updated the game, if they ever will update the game. But, multiple times, 3 or 4 or 5 times in my playthrough, I would run into these bugs that would soft lock the game. I'd shoot out of a barrel like you do in Donkey Kong games, how you shoot through barrels, and I get stuck between the foreground and the background, and I'm just suspended there. There's no way to kill myself. I have to exit the level and start it over. The load times are also really long on Switch, so that's kind of a problem. But yeah, it's just a very buggy, unpolished game that I think could have used more time. I never beat the final boss because I would attack it, but it's sometimes my attacks wouldn't register. I don't know if it was a hitbox thing, but it seemed like that was glitching out. So it's just if this game had more time in the oven, it would easily be an 8 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10. It's another game like Astrobot that doesn't do anything new, but it takes old ideas and does them so well. It's even got 3D sections that's kind of like Crash Bandicoot, where you're going away from the camera and kind of like a 3D kind of a labyrinth thing, like a linear 3D sections. So the game had a lot of potential. It's even composed by David Wise. David Wise, after Yoko Shimomura, like I said way earlier on, it's my second favorite video game composer. In the game, it looks pretty great. The visuals are really nice, but yeah, it's just it's too broken and buggy, and that's a real shame. They need to fix that. If they do, then that's a solid game. Might would have been one of my favorite games of the year, but as it is, I don't look back on that game super fondly because I just remember all the times I got frustrated with the game soft locking on me, and that's a shame. I also have on here, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Dragon Quest III HD 2D. Might would have been in my top 15 list. It might have even been very high, like the top 5, but I didn't really play that game very much. I played the first couple hours of it on the channel, and I liked what I played of it, but I just got bogged down with so many other games. It didn't help that it came out so close after Mario and Luigi Brothers ship, and so I finished that game, and I kind of didn't love it, and that game was already an RPG, so I kind of didn't want to jump straight into another turn-based RPG when the last one already had me so burnt out. So yeah, I may end up having to just start a new file and start all over whenever I go to sink my teeth into that game. But yeah, I was really looking forward to that game. It's kind of unfortunate I didn't get to play through it in 2024, but maybe next year, because I know they're coming out with a remake of Dragon Quest 1 and 2. But that one probably would have been on here because I do really like the Dragon Quest games. And then otherwise this year, I played Runner 2, which got ported to Switch this year. I didn't put it in the top 15 list because it's just a port. Unlike Luigi's Mansion, which at least had some stuff, some assets remade, some textures improved and stuff here and there. Runner 2 is kind of a straight port of the Wii U game, which came out in like 2013. It's an auto runner, but it's a really, really solid game. It's probably my favorite of the Runner trilogy. I had a really good time with that. That might be another 9 out of 10 game. It's pretty cheap. It's maybe like $20 or less, and I'm sure it goes on sale all the time. So give that game a check it out if you get the chance, if you didn't play it back in the day. I think you can also play it on, like PlayStation Premium or whatever. It's like a PS3 game. But you can't play PS3 games natively on the PS5, so it's like a streaming thing. You have to stream it, which unless you've got amazing internet for a rhythm-based auto-running game, you're probably not going to want to play it that way, because if you have any delay at all, that's really going to screw you up. But that was a really good game. I was glad to finally play through it, because I had it on Wii U, and I played the first world or something, but I never beat it. But I had a really, really good time playing through that game. And then Cavern of Dreams was a pretty good 3D platform. I think it maybe came out last year on like Steam, but it just came to Switch this year. Very surreal. As it got close to the end of the games, in some ways, which is very different for a 3D platformer, it almost felt like it was getting a little psychological horror-esque. So that was a pretty good game. It could be a little cryptic. There were times I didn't fully know where I was supposed to go. I'd give it maybe an 8 out of 10. Not my favorite 3D platformer ever, but there's a lot of steep competition. There's a lot of 3D platformers out there. But it was a good game. I'm going to have to wrap this up. My voice is failing on me if you haven't noticed already. Maybe I need to take a sip of water. But that might have helped a little bit. Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remastered I played this year. I'd never played the Tomb Raider games before. I have a good friend of mine who was really strongly trying to get me into playing Tomb Raider because it's like her favorite game of all time. So I finally bit the bullet. I finished the first one. I've played maybe half of Tomb Raider 2. I just don't think Tomb Raider's for me. I'm not playing with the tank controls. I'm playing with the modern controls. But even so, it still just feels so janky to me. I'm not a Tomb Raider fan. Maybe if I kept going, I would like it more. But as is, nah, Tomb Raider is not really for me. Moving on. I like how you can switch the graphics instantaneously. That's really cool. It looks pretty nice in the remastered graphics. I think they did a good job remaking it. I just don't think those games hold up that good or are very good. But that's just my opinion. Eventually, I'll probably finish 2 and play 3. But as it is, but that's pretty much it. Otherwise, non-game things that Nintendo did. They released the alarm clock, which I don't have a lot to say about that. That's kind of whatever. I never picked it up. It's not really for me, but that's a thing they did. It's like $100. I think that's kind of overpriced for an alarm clock, because most of us just set our alarms on our phones, so it seems a little redundant. But, it is what it is. That's just another thing Nintendo did this year. They opened up the Donkey Kong Country expansion to the theme park, which is in Japan, and it's going to be coming to the U.S. Pretty early in 2025. Well, we don't know for sure, but at some point in 2025, it'll be opening here in Orlando, Florida, so that's exciting. Looks pretty good. The merch that they have for sale at the merch store, it doesn't look all that good, to be honest, but the Donkey Kong ride itself looks awesome, where you're shooting out of the cannon, so that's amazing. I'm glad they finally opened up that, and that it's going to be coming to the U.S. soon. Hopefully I can go to that next year in Florida. This year, I guess, by the time this video goes out. And then Nintendo also had little direct where they showed off the Nintendo Museum this year, and that was pretty cool, giving us a look at the... it's only going to be in Japan, so I'll probably never go to it. But it's cool that Nintendo's actually starting to care about preserving their history and like all of their years' worth of archival, documents and prototypes and stuff like that, because they need to. That's important. So I'm glad they're putting that stuff out there. Nintendo's just really opening up in general. They used to be a very infamously conservative company, but now they're becoming a lot more liberal, not like politically, I'm not talking politics, but I just mean being willing to try different things and do things people have been wanting them to do for decades, but they've just been too stubborn to do. They put out the Nintendo Music apps. There's an official way to listen to Nintendo's music that they update like weekly, so that's cool, because people would always get mad because Nintendo would like copyright strike if somebody would upload their soundtracks to YouTube. Now there's an official way you can listen to their music from your phone, and it's a pretty good service. It works pretty good. You can, it'll still play even while you've got the screen turned off, so it's nice. I like it. But yeah, then they had a Nintendo Direct in June. They only had one full-fledged Nintendo Direct this year. A lot of the games they announced have already come out this year that we already talked about on this list, but there's some that we know, that'll be coming in 2025, specifically Metroid Prime 4. We finally got a look at that this year. Looks pretty good. It doesn't look that different from the other Metroid Prime games, but, it doesn't need to. Like I said, not every game has to reinvent the wheel, so even if it is just kind of another Metroid Prime game and not some big open world Breath of the Wild-esque Metroid game, which is kind of what I thought we would get. I thought it would be this big, huge open thing, and maybe it still will. We only got a little teaser, but even if not, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Metroid fan, so, if the hardcore Metroid fans are happy, then, that's great, whether I love the game or not. I love Metroid Dread, so I'll play it when it comes out. I'll give it a shot. I'm looking forward to it. Pokemon, I've never been the biggest Pokemon fan, but they announced Pokemon Legends ZA in 2024. I loved Pokemon Legends Arceus. That's the one Pokemon game that really grabbed me. I beat it. I adored that game. Pokemon, I should say. I think I might have said Pokemon, which is not how you're supposed to say it, but whatever. But yeah, kind of borders on sort of have an open-ended, not fully open world, but kind of a little bit like Breath of the Wild, where you've got the freedom to go where you want. It's got a really pretty art style. You're catching Pokemon, you're gathering materials. I thought that game was amazing. So I'm really looking forward to Pokemon Legends ZA and just having more of that. So that'll be coming out sometime in 2025. And then we also know about stuff like Little Nightmares 3. I love the first Little Nightmares. Second one didn't do much for me, so maybe the third one hopefully will be better. And then I think the people who made the first two Little Nightmare games left Bandai Namco and are now part of THQ, and so they're making a Little Nightmares spiritual successor called Reanimal, so that'll be interesting to see. I don't know which one will be better. The new Little Nightmares game made by a new team or a new original game made by the old Little Nightmares team, so we'll see on that. I think they're coming out with a new Sonic racing game that was called Sonic Racing Crossroads, maybe. So we'll see if that's good. I didn't really play a lot of like the Sonic racing games or like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, but people love that game. Like Racing Transformed, the one that was on like Wii U and I think PS3 and Xbox 360 and stuff. So it sounds like by the name Crossroads, which is a pretty clever name, sounds like it's probably going to be like a Sega crossover thing with different characters from like, Samba de Amigo and Knights and stuff like that in there probably. So that'll be pretty cool. But not sure how much it'll be for me, but I might check it out. What else was announced this year that's coming out next year? The Game Awards, they had a few pretty good announcements. They're coming out with a new Okami. We don't know when that'll come. That probably won't come out for years. But that was an awesome announcement. I was very stoked about that. They're coming out with a weird Pac-Man thing. That was another game that released early at the start of this year, was this Pac-Man like Battle Royale. It's called like Pac-Man Chomp Champs, something, Mega Tunnel Battle, something. It wasn't great. It was like $30, $20-$30. I bought it, but like after a few days, the online was like dead. Like it's like pretty much an online only game, and like nobody's playing it, so you're just matched up with computers. So it kind of felt like a waste of money. So I didn't bother putting it on the list. But they're coming out with some kind of Pac-Man Metroidvania thing that's kind of like a horror. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about that. I might try it just because I love Pac-Man, but I don't know about that one. what else? We got the Sonic 3 movie this year, which at the time of recording I've not seen it yet because I'd gotten over like being sick and crap. But that's another thing that happened this year. So overall, I think this was a really solid year for gaming. If I had to rate the year as a whole, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. You know, it's a B year. It's a solid year, and again for the final year of the Switch's life, pretty good. I didn't talk about like the games we got on Nintendo Switch Online. You know, we got Banjo Tooie on the Nintendo 64 app. Finally, it took ages, but it's here. Hopefully we'll get Smash Brothers 64 and like Diddy Kong Racing and games like that soon. But also we had God, what else do we have? The original Super Mario Land. That one also took way longer than it should have. But we got the Donkey Kong Land trilogy like back to back to back. It was like each week we were getting another Donkey Kong Land game. I never played those before, so that was a fun treat getting to play through all three of those games. We got what else did we get? Oh, we got Metroid, the Game Boy Advance one. It's a remake of the original Metroid game, Metroid Zero Mission. I got to play that for the first time. I enjoyed that. That was pretty good. I talk about how, you know, Metroidvanias aren't my favorite genre, but that game's pretty short. It's like a 5-hour game, so that one I didn't really get stuck on or anything for any substantial amount of time. That was pretty good. We got Four Swords. That was pretty cool. I never played that before either. The Golden Sun games. I played a few hours of the first one. I don't know if I loved it, but, you know, a lot of people really like those games, want Isaac, the main character in Smash Brothers. Maybe I'll go back at some point and play through it, but what little I played, I don't know, but that was a pretty big deal. The Game Boy Color Mario Golf and Mario Tennis games, they put those on there this year. Even some of their more niche, obscure stuff I can appreciate. Like on the NES, they put, I think it was this year, they put like Devil World on there, which I think was only ever in Japan. So like it's the first time you can actually play that here in America. And they put like Mach Rider on there, which like they've referenced in Smash Brothers, but actually getting to play it is kind of surreal, you know. It's not necessarily like they're great games. Like they put Donkey Kong Jr. Math on there, but it's just obscure, weird stuff it's still a part of Nintendo's history, so I appreciate them putting those games on there. So it was a pretty good year overall, I think, for the Switch Online. Not the best year ever. You know, there's still a lot of games we're still waiting on where it's like, where's, you know, Wario Land 1, 2, and 4? Like, why is just the third one on there? Where's Donkey Kong 64? Where's, you know, but there was still a good amount of stuff this year. Oh, all the Starfy games that were like Japanese only. Sucks they didn't translate those into English, because that I would probably play through them if they were translated. But as it is, I don't really. I played a little bit and it was like I can't understand anything, so I don't know if I really want to play this. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid year for games overall. Real quick, I just want to shout out a couple other games I played this year that didn't come out this year, but that I just personally took the time to go back and play. On PS5, I played Daxter for the first time. They put that this year on the PlayStation 5 service where you could play all the old games. Because it was back on the PSP. I never had a PSP as a kid, but I loved the original Jak and Daxter. I've got a playthrough of it up on the channel. I played Jak 2 and 3. I thought Jak 2 sucked and Jak 3 was okay, but they were so different from the first game. But Daxter feels like a proper return to being a traditional 3D platformer, and so it feels more closer to the first Jak and Daxter game than the other two games did. And I like how it almost kind of feels like how at that time Nintendo had like Luigi's Mansion with the vacuum. You had Mario Sunshine with Flood, the hover nozzle that squirts water. In this game, you're a I didn't realize that before I played it, that you're a like a pest control person, an exterminator. I couldn't think of the word for it. So you have like one of those. They'll have those things with like that comes out that squirts the gas that kills them. So that's kind of fun. It feels like Luigi's Mansion or Mario Sunshine, just going around just spraying all the bugs to kill them. So that was a really good game. I really enjoyed that this year. I played. What else did I play for the first time this year? I played. I've been playing going back and playing some traditional Pokemon games. I played through like Pokemon X. I'm not the biggest Pokemon guy, so like. I don't know. I like the newer ones where they're doing more open world stuff, but the old linear stuff just isn't really doing it for me. But But yeah, I played a lot of games this year. I'm trying to think back. I played through Immortals Phoenix Rising finally, which was decent. It's kind of, Ubisoft's take on Breath of the Wild. I think they announced that they were working on a sequel, but I think that maybe got canceled, so that's kind of a shame because I did like that game. It wasn't as good as Breath of the Wild, but it was still pretty good. I think some of the puzzles were a little obtuse because it's got basically the equivalent of like Breath of the Wild shrines. But I had a fun time exploring the open world and marking waypoints on the map. That was it was a pretty good game. So yeah, I played a lot of games this year, some that came out in previous years, but a lot that came out this year. It's just a good year for gaming, and I think 2025 is probably going to be even better if, we got the Switch 2, if that comes out next year, which it's looking like it probably will, and I'll probably have like a brand new Mario Kart and a brand new, are we going to get a new Smash Brothers with even more content? Are we going to get, an open world 3D Mario game? Who knows what we're going to get. We're going to get something Zelda in the launch year. Obviously, Tears of the Kingdom's not that old. We're probably not going to get a brand new 3D Zelda. But maybe a remake of Twilight Princess with like beautiful graphics that showcase the power of the new system that looks like that Wii U tech demo of Zelda from like 2011. That would be sick. But yeah, I've got high hopes for 2025. I think it's lining up to maybe even be better than this year. And then all those games that we talked about with the Metroids coming out and the Donkey Kongs and the everything else that we know about, Pokemon Legends, ZA. It's looking like a pretty good year next year. So yeah. I played a lot of PlayStation games too. Like I never grew up with a PlayStation, but I'm going back and playing like Ape Escape. That was a lot of fun this year. I played Ape Escape 1 and 2. Yeah, I played a good handful of old PlayStation games that I got to experience this year for the first time. But I had a good year this year. Gaming aside, one last thing, just entertainment in general. They came out with the live-action Netflix first season of the Avatar live-action series in collaboration with Nickelodeon that's been in the works for years. It got mixed reception. Not everybody loved it. I thought it was great. So that was another big win for me this year in terms of just entertainment as a whole. So yeah, I couldn't really ask for a whole lot more this year. I felt pretty full, pretty content. I mean, Avatar is my favorite show, so we got something Avatar related this year. We got a remake of my favorite video game of all time, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. That's a darn good year. But yeah, I think we're going to end this video now. We might do a follow-up video where I talk about what I hope gets announced in 2025, what games I'm expecting, and all that fun stuff. But yeah, that's going to do it for now. We've been talking for over 2 hours. My voice is shot. Came back a little bit after I took a sip of water. But yeah, I hope you all have a happy 2025. I even tried to dress fancy. I'm wearing like a Mario t-shirt or something, but for this, where I was going to be in front of the camera doing a year-end retrospective thing, I wanted to put on a polo shirt, be a little bit more proper with it. Thank you all so much for joining me. If you stuck with us through to the end, I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully I can make more content like this. If I do, I might need to invest in maybe better lighting or a better camera or something to where the footage doesn't look so grainy. I might just upload this as is. I don't know if I'm going to splice together a bunch of B-roll from different games and stuff, mainly because I want to have this up, at midnight at New Year's, and probably won't have time to do all that. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you stuck around to the end, let me know what you thought of this format. If you want to see more stuff like this, I thought about maybe I could do a weekly podcast where I'm just talking, into the microphone like this. I think that could be pretty cool. So you could consider this maybe a test run for that. I don't know. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Give me some feedback, what you thought about this format. This was an unscripted video. I was just kind of talking. Let me know if you like that, or if you want me to start making a script, or if you like me just speaking off the cuff. If you want B-roll in there, if you like just seeing me sit in front of a camera, that way you can put it on in the background, and while you're making something to eat or whatever, not having to really look at the screen. Let me know what you thought. But that's going to be a wrap for this video. So thank you guys so very much for joining me once again. If you like this, please consider liking the video and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate that. My goal was to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. It's December 31st. I got 112. So I'm very proud and thankful for that. So thank you all who have subscribed to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. Hope you'll stick around because there's a lot more exciting things coming in 2025. I'm planning to play all kinds of extra playthroughs. We're going to do a Hat in Time this year. We're probably going to do a lot more Kirby. We're going to do Kirby in the Forgotten Land. We're going to do Kirby's Adventure. Maybe more Kirby. Maybe Kirby Superstar. I don't know. We'll see. But we're going to do those other Kirby games for sure this year. We're going to do Mario 3D World. We're going to do Mario Odyssey. Probably Super Mario Galaxy 2. That one's going to be a little bit more cumbersome because I'm going to have to hook up the Wii U because I've been hoping they'd put that game on Switch, but it's not looking like they're going to do that anytime soon. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD comes out at the start of this year. We're doing a playthrough of that. That's going to be one of the first things we do in 2025. We're going to be playing our first full Link playthrough on the channel. I think the Zelda game I'm going to start with is Link's Awakening. The HD remakes, we're going to do that because it's kind of a short game. We can knock that out pretty quickly. Maybe we'll do Thousand Year Door this year. Again, that's my favorite game of all time, but man, that's a long game. That's a real commitment, and I'm a little scared to take that one on. But I want to, so we'll probably do that this year. We're going to do, I don't know what, we might do some PlayStation stuff. We might do a Astrobot playthrough. We might do a Sly Cooper playthrough, or Psychonauts, or Sackboy. We might do, we're going to do Super Mario Brothers Wonder for sure this year. So stay tuned. I got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. We're going to do more Crash Bandicoot. We're going to do Crash Bandicoot 3 this year. We're going to probably do Crash Bandicoot 4 this year and Crash Bandicoot 1 this year. I'm making a lot of promises. I'm probably shouldn't be committing to so much stuff, but yeah, I got a lot of stuff that I want to play. So I'm excited for 2025, and I hope you are too. I got comic conventions I'm going to go to, meet some voice actors. There's one where I'm going to meet Rob Paulson and Charles Martinet and a bunch of other people, and then hopefully I can go to Super Nintendo World this year, and I'm excited for 2025. So yeah, just to very briefly, if you're going through mental stuff, because I spent years before therapy and medication just very anxious and depressed and dreading life every day, but get help, get therapy, get medicated, because I am so motivated at this point in my life, and I genuinely have a zeal and excitement to be here. I'm so excited for 2025, and yeah, I didn't have this same passion to be alive always. So it sounds cliche when people tell you that it gets better, but like I'm genuinely, I think you can tell I'm not phoning this in. I'm just very enthusiastic about next year. But I wasn't always that way. For a good 7 or 8 years, it was a real struggle. So I don't want to get too deep into like mental health stuff, but like, help is available, but you have to seek it out. You have to be willing to put in the time and the effort. Don't be afraid to take medication. I was always scared of the side effects. Ask your doctor if you experience blah, 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 your depression worsens, you develop scary thoughts or actions. But medicating changed my life, and therapy did too. Therapy, it can be a little expensive if your insurance doesn't cover it, especially, but you can't put a price on your mental health. And I feel like before therapy, like I don't know if I could have held down a job, but now like it's an investment. It's a investment in your health and your well-being, and it's a monetary investment. It might cost however much for therapy, but you're going to be so motivated to work harder and do better and make money at your job. So yeah, I'm really thankful. 2024 was a pretty good year for me, and I'm really looking for 2025. And if you're going through depression or anxiety, I hope, that you get the help that you need, because it is available and it does work. Don't let anyone tell you like, oh, you can't overcome depression or anxiety. People are just that way, because anyone who tells you that, they're a miserable person stuck in that trap, and it can be hard if you don't know how to help yourself, because I didn't know how to help myself. But you can learn and get educated, and then at that point put in the work and love life again. I'm happy and I'm thankful to God that I'm alive, and I'm so excited for next year, and I hope you guys will be too. So I'll see you all in 2025. Hang in there. You're important, you're valuable. As long as you have breath in you, you can contribute positively to society, because you can't do good for anybody if you're dead. But while you have breath in you, the world is your oyster, So do good things. But yeah, we're gonna end it there. Sorry, I got a little real at the, but I just noticed how enthusiastic I was, and it was like I didn't always feel this way. So it does get better if you hang in there, stay optimistic about it, and don't think that you're going to be in that state forever, even if it feels like it some days. Put in the work, get the help you need, and hopefully, God willing, you'll also have a fantastic 2025 like I think I'm going to have. So I'll catch you guys on the next video. I love you all, and yeah, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.